Chapter 1146. Unconvinced. Behind Elder Huaxia, there were 5 other young men under the age of 30. Their auras were extremely powerful, and they were clearly above the Emperor realm. In addition to the 5 geniuses from Sky Capital Peak, there were 5 other figures standing behind the dean. Zhuowen was no stranger to them. They were the top 5 geniuses of the Outer Yard: Evil Moon, Diba, Moyan Wushang, Qing Yin, and Shi Emperor. The dean and Elder Huaxia were extremely focused. The arrival of Zhuowen and the blue-clothed young man did not attract their attention at all. Instead, the geniuses standing behind the 2 old men all looked at Zhuowen and the blue-clothed young man. The 5 geniuses from Sky Capital Peak were fine, but the top 5 geniuses of the Outer Yard standing behind the dean stared at Zhuowen in astonishment. Evil Moon, who was the leader, stared at Zhuowen with a cold glint in his eyes, as if he was going to devour Zhuowen at any time. Zhuowen naturally felt Evil Moon's hostile gaze, but he did not pay too much attention to it. Instead, he looked at the dean and Elder Huaxia. The entire courtyard appeared to be extremely quiet. Only the sound of the 2 old men hitting the chessboard when they were playing chess could be heard clearly at this moment. No one in the courtyard made a sound. They just silently watched the 2 old men play seriously. Zhuowen was not in a hurry. He followed behind the blue-clothed young man and fixed his gaze on the 2 old men. He silently waited for the game to end. Haha. Bai Yang, I finally won this game, right? After losing to you so many times, I finally won this game. It wasn't easy. Elder Huaxia laughed, his face brimming with excitement. The dean slowly withdrew his right hand from the chessboard and said with a faint smile, Huaxia, I admit defeat for this game. Seeing the dean admit defeat so easily, Elder Huaxia asked with uncertainty, Bai Yang, you didn't go easy on me, did you? The dean waved his hand and said, I didn't go easy on you. I lost. Hearing this, Elder Huaxia was relieved. He chuckled and shifted his gaze to the blue-clothed young man and Zhuowen who had just entered the courtyard. Lanju, didn't you go to examine the island's origin? Why are you here now? Elder Huaxia asked faintly. The blue-clothed young man named Lanju said respectfully, Elder, the island's origin is basically finished today. Also, this young man has obtained the origin Azura Island, one of the 5 strongest islands. So he intends to apply to be a registered disciple. Oh! This little guy also obtained the origin of one of the 5 strongest islands. A trace of astonishment flashed in Elder Huaxia's eyes as he looked at Zhuowen. The dean's gaze also landed on Zhuowen and the smile on his face grew even wider. It was obvious that he was quite happy that Zhuowen had obtained the source energy of Azura Island. The top 5 geniuses on the Heavenly Sovereign list behind the dean were more or less surprised. Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin looked at each other with strange expressions. Evil Moon's eyes were gloomy. Diba, who was beside Evil Moon, frowned slightly. The origin he had obtained was the origin of Azura Island. There were only 3 people competing for the origin. Other than him, there was the Yama Crown Prince and the mysterious black-faced young man. Zhuowen wasn't among them. After returning to Excellent God Island, Zhuowen had restored his appearance. Diba didn't associate Zhuowen with the black-faced young man. Since that's the case, this young man has the qualifications to become an in-name disciple in advance. You can decide on this matter. There's no need to apply to me. Elder Huaxia waved his hand. Lanju's eyes flickered. He came in front of Elder Huaxia and flicked his finger. He took out the origin of Azura Island that Zhuowen had obtained and handed it to Elder Huaxia. Elder, this young man has absorbed most of the origin of Azura Island, leaving only this little. That's why I'm here to ask for your opinion. Elder Huaxia narrowed his eyes when he saw the small amount of origin of Azura Island in Lanju's hand. He looked at Zhuowen indifferently and said, You're quite bold. You actually absorbed so much origin of Azura Island. Originally, I wanted to promote you to an in-name disciple in advance. Now, it seems that I have to wait. There are other requirements. Come find me after you've completed them. At that time, I'll decide if you can become an in-name disciple. Many people in the courtyard revealed mocking expressions when they heard Elder Huaxia's words. Their gazes when they looked at Zhuowen were extremely strange. This brat really did not know anything. The fight for this island's essence was originally meant to be handed over to the sky capital peak. Absorbing a little origin of Azura Island wasn't a big deal. However, Zhuowen had directly absorbed 2/3 of the origin of Azura Island. He had absorbed most of the origin of Azura Island and handed over a small portion of it. Elder Huaxia was naturally unhappy. How could he let Zhuowen become an in-name disciple in advance? What a foolish fellow. He actually dared to absorb the origin of Azura Island without permission. Elder Huaxia, I don't think this kind of person deserves to be an in-name disciple. There's no need to give him a chance to fulfill the remaining requirements, Xueyue suddenly said in a clear voice. Brother Xueyue is right. I also participated in the competition for the origin of Azura Island. There were only 3 people who could obtain the origin of Azura Island. At that time, I didn't see this young man at all. Obviously, he used some despicable means to obtain the origin of Azura Island. This kind of person doesn't deserve to enter the inner yard, Diba said indifferently. Moyan Wushang raised her eyebrows and coldly retorted, Zhuowen was able to obtain the origin of Azura Island. This shows that he has the strength and potential. This kind of genius is more than enough to become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak. Wushang is right. Zhuowen's strength and potential aren't any worse than some people. Why can't he become an in-name disciple? Soft sound echoed from the side, supporting Zhuowen. Zhuowen silently stood in the same place. His attention was on Elder Huaxia. His eyes gradually became gloomy. Elder Huaxia had taken away the origin of Azura Island, but he didn't intend to promote him to an in-name disciple. Was it just because Zhuowen had absorbed some of the origin of Azura Island? This reason was too ridiculous. Huaxia. Zhuowen's talent is indeed very strong. I think this kind of genius should be worthy of being an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak, right? The benevolent-looking dean suddenly said with a smile. Bai Yang. Are you going to plead for this little guy? Elder Huaxia frowned. The dean nodded and said with a smile, this little guy's talent and potential are indeed extraordinary. I think you, Huaxia, are also a person who loves talents. You won't let this kind of genius slip through your hands in vain, right? Dean, sir. This Zhuowen has no regard for the law. He is arrogant and conceited. Moreover, his talent isn't that good either. You can't protect this kind of ant like this. If this kind of ant becomes an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak, it will really ruin the reputation of Sky Capital Peak, Xueyue said with a cold smile. Elder Huaxia nodded and said to the dean, Bai Yang, it's not that I don't want to be considerate, but as Xueyue said, this little guy is indeed somewhat daring. Moreover, his attitude isn't very good. It doesn't matter if he absorbs a bit of Azura Island's source energy, but this little guy absorbed most of it. He is obviously a selfish guy. I have to consider this kind of person with bad conduct before deciding to let him enter the inner court. The dean frowned. Elder Huaxia's words clearly indicated that he didn't intend to accept Zhuowen as an in-name disciple. Lanju. You can send the guest out, Elder Huaxia said indifferently. The blue-clothed youth nodded and immediately turned around. He glanced at Zhuowen and said, Elder Huaxia's meaning is already very clear. I don't think I need to say anything more. Let's go. However, Zhuowen stood in place like a boulder. He calmly stared at Elder Huaxia and said, I don't accept this. Elder Huaxia, who originally ignored Zhuowen, slowly turned around. His cold gaze fell on Zhuowen as he said, You say you don't accept this? Yes. I don't accept this. My strength is stronger than that of Emperor Shi, Emperor Ba, and Xueyue. If they can become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak, why can't I? Zhuowen pointed at Xueyue and the other two and said indifferently. When these words came out, Xueyue, Emperor Ba, and Emperor Shi narrowed their eyes. This Zhuowen was too arrogant. He actually dared to call the 3 of them trash. Especially Xueyue. The coldness in his eyes was extremely dense. He even had the heart to kill Zhuowen. Oh, you are very confident. However, based on your words, do you think you have the strength to defeat the 3 of them? Elder Huaxia narrowed his eyes and his voice became cold. Zhuowen said he didn't accept this in front of him, which naturally made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Of course not. Zhuowen shook his head and looked at Xieyue, Emperor Ba, and Emperor Shi. He said indifferently, "Do the three of you plan to come at me together? Or one by one?" When these words came out, the atmosphere in the courtyard became extremely strange. Not only the few geniuses of Sky Capital Peak, but even Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin looked at Zhuowen strangely. Xieyue, Emperor Ba, and Emperor Shi's eyelids twitched. Soon after, their eyes were filled with anger. This brat was too arrogant. He actually dared to jump on their heads. He didn't know how to die. The reason why Zhuowen chose the three of them was naturally because he had some direct or indirect conflicts with them. Therefore, he targeted the three of them. "Do I need Emperor Ba and Xieyue to deal with an ant like you? You think too highly of yourself." Emperor Shi coldly snorted and took a step forward. He appeared above Zhuowen as if he had teleported. He stretched out his right hand and a terrifying yuan power surged out. It formed a huge mountain in the sky. He swung his right hand and instantly, the yuan power mountain flew above Zhuowen's head. Chapter 1147. Provoke Evil Moon / The moment he destroyed the Yuanli mountain, Zhuowen had already arrived in front of Emperor Shi. The 7-kill saber was infused with a terrifying killing aura. With an indomitable momentum, it swept towards Emperor Shi's vital points. Feeling the sharp saber chi of the 7-kill saber, Emperor Shi's eyelids twitched. A strong sense of crisis rose in his heart. Advent of the Emperor. The moment this sense of crisis spread throughout his mind, Emperor Shi did not hesitate to use his strongest move, Advent of the Emperor. Boom! Powerful Yuanli burst out from his body like a terrifying hurricane, sweeping across the sky. It turned into a shadow of the Emperor that was dozens of feet tall. As the shadow of the Emperor opened and closed its eyes, a bright light burst out, like a dazzling star in the night sky. Bang! As soon as the shadow of the Emperor appeared, a large fan-like hand descended, directly smashing down on Zhuowen's head. The terrifying energy formed a whistling wind, almost forming an endless hurricane that filled the entire sky. Second level of bedevilment. Zhuowen directly activated the state of second stage of bedevilment, blood-red hair fluttering, blood chi gushing out. The 7-kill saber actually didn't dodge or evade the descending big hand of the Emperor Phantom. Break! An indifferent voice rang out, and the 7-kill saber flashed past. Then, the entire right arm of the shadow of the Emperor was invaded and shattered by the terrifying demonic slaughter aura. The moment the right arm of the shadow of the Emperor was shattered, Zhuowen shot out and instantly arrived in front of Emperor Shi. The 7-kill saber slashed out again. How can he be so strong? Emperor Shi's pupils shrank to the size of needles. The moment he saw Zhuowen cleanly cut off the right arm of the shadow of the Emperor, Emperor Shi had already felt that something was wrong. This Zhuowen was so powerful that it was suffocating. Swoosh! The 7-kill saber was getting closer. Emperor Shi gritted his teeth, waved his sleeve, and took out a grey wheel. He used it to block in front of him, wanting to block Zhuowen's attack. Boom! The 7-kill saber and the wheel heavily collided. Then, the two froze in the air, as if time had stopped. Break! Before She could breathe a sigh of relief, Zhuowen's cold voice rang out. Then, an extremely terrifying force spread out from the blade of the 7-kill's blade. Crack! Then, to Emperor Shi's astonishment, the roulette shattered and the sharp saber chi swept past him. Retreat! Emperor Shi raised his hands, withstanding the terrifying saber chi, and retreated continuously. He actually retreated nearly 100 steps, and his back smashed heavily against the wall at the edge of the courtyard. Then, the terrifying power caused the wall behind him to shatter into countless pieces. Poochie! Emperor Shi spat out a mouthful of blood, and his expression became much more dispirited. When the other people in the courtyard saw this scene, they were all shocked. In any case, Emperor Shi was in existence ranked 5th on the Heavenly Venerate list. His peak Heavenly Venerate cultivation was actually defeated so easily by Zhuowen. Has this little fellow also reached the peak of the Empyrean realm? The dean's meaningful gaze fell on Zhuowen, and he could not help but mutter with a smile. Swoosh! Diba came to Emperor Shi Di's side and looked at his dispirited younger brother. His eyes revealed a bone-chilling coldness, and then he stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "We are all fellow disciples, but you are actually so ruthless. It seems that you really have no regard for the law." Yet Zhuowen scoffed and said, "Is this attack of mine considered heavy-handed? Aren't you just trying to find a reason to attack me by saying this? There's no need to waste so much time. Just attack, because in my opinion, there's not much difference between you and Emperor Shi Di." Diba's face twitched when he heard this. This damned Zhuowen was really rude. He actually dared to say such bold words. The others were also interested. It seemed that Zhuowen was really planning to challenge the geniuses on the Heavenly Venerate list who had already become in-name disciples. Elder Huaxie did not stop them, but just watched all of this indifferently. Although he was rather surprised that Zhuowen had defeated Emperor Shi Di, to Elder Huaxie, whose strength had already reached the peak of the mid-level Emperor realm, this kind of battle below the Emperor realm was just child's play. Good, good, good. Since that's the case, I'll let you have a good look at my strength. When the time comes, you'll regret your rude words now. Diba was so angry that he laughed. After dealing with Emperor Shi Di, he took a step forward and a terrifying aura gushed out of his body like a volcanic eruption. Diba was ranked second on the Heavenly Venerate list, and his strength was much stronger than Emperor Shi Di. It was said that his strength was comparable to the first-level Emperor realm, which was on par with the Yama Crown Prince of Azura Island. However, Diba did not have an Emperor weapon, so in terms of foundation and strength, the Yama Crown Prince was actually superior. At this moment, Zhuowen wanted to establish his might and prove his strength to Elder Huaxie. Therefore, he would not hold back in the slightest. He had to defeat Diba without any hesitation in order to achieve the effect of establishing his might. Third-level bedevilment. With a low shout, Zhuowen did not retreat. Instead, he took the initiative to attack Diba. At the same time, 8 blood seas gushed out of the void and surrounded Zhuowen, making him look like a demon or a god. Boom! Boom! In just an instant, the two of them collided fiercely in the air. Diba's fighting style was extremely fitting for his name. He was wild and unruly, and he punched out with the force of 1,000 catties with his bare hands. Every strike carried a terrifying power that caused the surrounding space to tremble. This guy's fists and feet are very tough. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and slashed out with the 7 kills saber, aiming for Diba's chest. The sharp hissing sound of the saber cutting through the air exploded out of nowhere, stimulating the ears of the crowd. Diba threw out a punch and heavily smashed the 7 kills saber's blade. Then, the sound of metal clashing rang out, and an extremely powerful and terrifying air wave surged out between the two of them. Haha. My physical body is comparable to a royal spiritual treasure. With your mere royal spiritual treasure, you won't be able to break through my physical body's defense. Diba's arrogant voice resounded in the air, sounding extremely presumptuous. Your words sound very familiar. Back then, there was someone who said that his physical body was comparable to a royal spiritual treasure in front of me, but his ending was not very good. Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out. Then, he put away the 7 kills saber and took out a blood-red halberd from his spirit ring. This blood-red halberd was the Azura halberd that Zhuowen had taken from the Yama Crown Prince. When he returned to the excellent Spirit Island, he had already successfully refined the Azura halberd. At this moment, he naturally did not feel unfamiliar or stagnant when using it. Since you're so confident in your physical body, I'll let you have a taste of this weapon. As he spoke, Zhuowen's left hand pressed against the end of the halberd while his right hand gripped the halberd tightly. Once again, he rushed towards Diba's right hand. Puff! This time, when Diba's originally indestructible right hand came into contact with the Azura halberd, bright red blood blossomed. Diba cried out in pain. He wanted to withdraw his hand, but unfortunately, Zhuowen's right hand moved and the halberd spun violently. It pierced through Diba's right arm like a mutton skewer. It pierced through Diba's palm and came out from his right shoulder. Blood splattered in the air. Puff! Zhuowen suddenly swung the halberd, and Diba's entire right arm was cut off by the Azura halberd. Diba cried out in pain and fell from the sky, crashing heavily onto the ground. At this moment, Diba finally recognized the halberd in Zhuowen's hand. It was the Azura halberd that belonged to the Yama crown prince. It was a low-grade emperor weapon. However, the intense pain did not make Diba wonder why the Azura halberd would appear in Zhuowen's hands. Moreover, the current situation did not allow him to think too much. Emperor weapon? The dean and elder Huashi raised their eyebrows and looked at Zhuowen in surprise. They did not expect this little guy to have an emperor weapon on him. He was really well hidden. The other people in the courtyard also looked surprised. Among them, Evil Moon frowned, and his expression became slightly ugly. In the two battles, Zhuowen had defeated Emperor Shi and Emperor Ba very cleanly. Even he was a little surprised by the speed at which Zhuowen's battle strength had increased. Although Zhuowen's emperor weapon, the Azura halberd, had surprised the dean and elder Huashi, it did not attract their attention. After all, the Azura halberd was only a low-grade emperor weapon. The two of them were mid-grade emperor realm experts and possessed mid-grade emperor weapons. A low-grade emperor weapon naturally did not catch their attention. "Did I say that you're trash?" Zhuowen said to Diba, who was lying on the ground, as he slowly landed on the ground. At that moment, Diba had already used his yuan power to stop the bleeding of his broken right arm. He stood up, but he did not refute Zhuowen's words. Instead, his eyes were filled with resentment. He had no right to refute Zhuowen's words. The former had indeed defeated him in front of everyone. Moreover, he had lost in such a miserable manner. Moving away from Diba, Zhuowen's gaze landed on Evil Moon, who had an ugly expression. He said indifferently, "It's your turn. Diba is so useless. I wonder if you, the #1 heavenly master monster, can do better." Boom. When Zhuowen's provocative words came out, an extremely terrifying aura erupted from Evil Moon's body. The latter glared at Zhuowen and said, "You're very confident after defeating Diba and Shi. It's to the point of being conceited." "Haha. Then, allow me to defeat you," Zhuowen mocked. "You're so smug just because you obtained an emperor weapon? Do you think you're invincible just because you have an emperor weapon? I'll send you from heaven to hell and let you know how hypocritical your conceit is." Evil Moon took a step forward and flicked his finger. A slender black saber appeared in his palm. A rather frightening emperor's might spread out from this black saber. This emperor's aura lingered around Evil Moon, creating a vacuum-like domain around him. Cyclones rose from it, and it looked terrifying. Emperor weapon? This Evil Moon actually has an emperor weapon. Sensing the emperor's might from the black saber in Evil Moon's hand, many people around the courtyard narrowed their eyes. Of course, no one was surprised. Chapter 1148. Moon Devourer. This saber is called Moon Devourer. I will use this saber to let you know how ridiculous your arrogance is. Evil Moon held the long black saber and slowly walked toward Zhuowen. The black tassels on the hilt swayed in the breeze, and a fierce aura flowed out. It was as if Evil Moon's body was covered with sharp blades at this moment. Evil Moon used Moon Devourer to kill a first-level Emperor Realm expert. I'm afraid Zhuowen is in danger. Looking at Evil Moon, who was slowly walking towards Zhuowen with Moon Devourer in his hand, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes revealed a tinge of worry. Although she wanted to stop Zhuowen, this battle was initiated by Zhuowen. It would be inappropriate for her to stop it. Therefore, she immediately looked at the dean, who was beside her, to ask for help. The dean shook his head and said, "Wushang, this battle was initiated by Zhuowen. It's not appropriate for us to stop it. Don't worry, Zhuowen is not simple. He won't lose." Hearing the dean's words, Moyan Wushang could only nod helplessly. However, he was still worried. Deng deng deng. Evil Moon's footsteps became faster and faster. The sound of his footsteps was like the sound of raindrops, converging into a symphony in the courtyard. At the same time, an incomparably black moon rose from Evil Moon's body. Black moon, dark sky. When the black moon rose to its highest point, the entire courtyard darkened as if night had fallen. A terrifying gravitational force crushed down from the black moon, acting on Zhuowen's body. Feeling the heavy pressure on his body, Zhuowen squinted his eyes and snorted coldly. A terrifying slaughter aura gushed out from his body, instantly breaking the gravitational force that crushed down on his body. Seeing that the pressure from the black moon did not affect Zhuowen in the slightest, Evil Moon's expression froze, and his gaze turned slightly ugly. He still remembered that half a year ago, Zhuowen could not move at all under the pressure of the black moon. Now, half a year had passed, and the black moon's pressure had no effect on him. Xie Yu snorted coldly. He held the moon devourer in his hand. Sparks flew between the tip of the saber and the ground. A sharp hissing sound resounded continuously in the courtyard. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Evil Moon had arrived in front of Zhuowen. With a flick of his right hand, Moon Devourer slashed upward with countless sparks. Black saber chi spread out and turned into a huge crescent-shaped black saber chi, which rushed toward Zhuowen. Feeling the horrifying sharpness of the crescent-shaped black blade chi, Zhuowen's brows furrowed slightly. His feet moved, retreating several dozen steps. When he reached the edge of the courtyard, Zhuowen stomped his foot and the Azura war halberd in his hand slashed out horizontally. The momentum of slaughter poured into the tip of the halberd, bursting out with terrifying power. Boom! The halberd collided with the saber chi. Zhuowen's right hand trembled slightly, causing the black saber chi to pause for a moment. Then, Zhuowen's feet moved, and his body moved a few steps to the side, just barely dodging the black saber chi. Boom! The saber chi passed through Zhuowen's side and slammed into the courtyard wall behind him. The sharp power exploded, and the entire wall burst open. Then, terrifying dust filled the air. The moment Zhuowen dodged the saber chi, a piercing sound exploded in his ears. Then, he found that Evil Moon had appeared in front of him without him noticing. Moon Devourer was chopping down from above his head. Zhuowen raised his hands, and the halberd in his hand swept out, fearlessly meeting the Moon Devourer. A sharp sound of collision rang out, and the saber and halberd burst into flames. Then, Zhuowen and Evil Moon each took a few steps back, staring at each other with dignified eyes. "Your senses are quite sharp," Evil Moon sneered. He stepped forward, and his left hand gently stroked the blade. Suddenly, the surface of Moon Devourer emitted an extremely sharp black light. Evil light cut. The moment the Moon Devourer's surface bloomed with black light, Evil Moon slashed out once again. Terrifying black gas began to spread out, forming a several hundred-meter-long intersecting saber chi. This saber chi was countless times more terrifying than the previous one. The aura revealed on the surface of the saber chi made Zhuowen shudder. However, Zhuowen did not dodge. Instead, he bravely met it. He pointed his right hand between his eyebrows, and a powerful mental energy spread out. At the same time, the ultimate sword array in the spiritual ring also rushed out, turning into dazzling sword lights that surrounded Zhuowen. Sword fire profound. Zhuowen's cold voice rang out. Then, a monstrous flame spread out, enveloping the crisscrossing saber chi. Mental energy. But a mere 6th grade origin array wants to stop my evil light cut. Aren't you a bit too naive? Evil Moon sneered. Then, the countless sword fire did not last long. It was directly dispersed by the crisscrossing evil light cut, and the remaining force swept toward Zhuowen. Sword thunder profound. Zhuowen did not seem to be in a hurry. He changed his seal, and the ultimate sword array changed again. The originally countless flames turned into monstrous thunderbolts, and the countless sword lights turned into thunderbolts. In an instant, the whole courtyard fell into a world of thunderbolts, and there were terrifying thunderbolts everywhere. Boom! 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 This time, in the world of thunderbolts, the terrifying evil light cut was really trapped and could not break free. Damn it! Why is this guy's mental energy so difficult to deal with? Evil Moon's eyes were gloomy. He secretly cursed and retreated. The moment the terrifying thunderbolts trapped the evil light cut, they spread and swept toward him, trying to trap him as well. Break! Zhuowen's heavenly voice rang out. Then, the evil light cut was surrounded by countless thunderbolts and finally disappeared. At the same time, Zhuowen took a step forward, and with countless thunderbolts, he instantly arrived above Evil Moon. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Numerous thunder swords fell from the sky and inserted themselves around Evil Moon. Suddenly, a powerful thunder cage was formed. Morning Treasure Seal. Wrath Treasure Seal. Love Treasure Seal. At the same time, Zhuowen used the 3 treasure seals that he had exchanged from the academy. Among them, the Morning Treasure Seal emitted a sorrowful aura that fell from the sky and shrouded Evil Moon's heart. Evil Moon's strength involuntarily decreased by several times. Zhuowen had the Wrath Treasure Seal and the Morning Treasure Seal in his body, which made Zhuowen's aura soar several times. Boom, boom, boom. After using the 3 treasured seals, Zhuowen descended from the sky, surrounded by the remaining lightning swords. Countless lightning bolts filled his body, as if at this moment, these lightning bolts were weaving a powerful lightning armor for Zhuowen. Cut. As soon as he entered the thunder cage, Zhuowen raised the Azura battle halberd and attacked Evil Moon continuously. Boom, boom, boom. Under Zhuowen's stormy attacks, Evil Moon frowned slightly and retreated continuously. Under the weakening effect of the Morning Treasure Seal and the harassment of countless thunder swords, he was already exhausted. Now, under the attack of Zhuowen, who was supported by the Love Treasure Seal and the Wrath Treasure Seal, he found it difficult to resist. It seems that Evil Moon is going to be defeated. The Dean's eyes were like torches. Through the countless thunderbolts, he could clearly see the scene in the Thunder Prison. At this moment, Evil Moon was already a little exhausted from running, and his strength was not as strong as he wanted to be. Lose. A cold voice rang out in the Thunder Prison. Then, the power of the thunderbolts on the surface of the Thunder Prison rose to an extremely terrifying level. A thunderbolt soared into the sky, forming a thunderbolt pillar that pierced the sky. The blazing thunderbolt almost made the rest of the people in the courtyard squint their eyes. Bang! In the next instant, the frightening lightning glow completely disappeared. Soon after, a muffled groan was emitted. An extremely miserable figure flew out from within the countless lightning bolts and heavily smashed dozens of meters away. The figure's clothes were tattered, his hair was disheveled, and there was a trace of charred black on his fair face. He looked quite comical. When everyone's eyes fell on the long black saber in his hand, the scene became quiet. They knew that the owner of this figure was Evil Moon, who ranked first on the Heavenly Sovereign list. Wasn't this black saber Evil Moon's emperor weapon, the Moon Devourer? Thump, thump, thump. The endless thunderbolts slowly converged, and then there was the crisp sound of footsteps. Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent as he slowly walked over to Evil Moon. He looked down at the latter indifferently and said, "Didn't you say that you wanted to let me know how ridiculous my conceit was? Now, why do I feel that your conceit is abnormally ridiculous?" Fart. As soon as Zhuowen's words came out, Evil Moon, who was lying limp on the ground, was furious. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. He had fainted from anger. Evil Moon was defeated just like that. Moyan Wushang and Qingyin looked at each other and saw a look of disbelief in each other's eyes. The 2 women still remembered that half a year ago, the young man who could not resist Evil Moon. Now, half a year had passed. Not only had the young man's cultivation increased greatly, but his strength had also reached an unfathomable level. Even Evil Moon, who ranked first on the Heavenly Sovereign list, was no match for Zhuowen. It seems that the first place on the Heavenly Sovereign list is about to change hands. After the shock, the 2 women could not help but mutter in a low voice. There were more complicated emotions in their beautiful eyes. Zhuowen paid no attention to the unconscious Evil Moon. He looked straight at Elder Huaxie and said, "Elder Huaxie, the 3 nominal disciples you chose are so weak. They're no match for me at all. I think I've already proven that I'm more qualified than the 3 of them to be a nominal disciple. Huaxie, you have seen Zhuowen's talent and strength. I don't think you will lose out if you become a nominal disciple of Sky Capital Peak, right?" The dean said with a laugh. Elder Huaxie's eyes flickered. Just as he was about to speak, the blue-clothed youth, Lan Ju, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stepped forward. He stared at the Azura halberd in Zhuowen's hand and said, "If you offer this emperor weapon to make up for the lack of Azura Island's origin, we can consider promoting you to a nominal disciple of Sky Capital Peak." "Heh! You want the Emperor weapon in my hand? Chapter 1149. Against Lan Ju. Among the 6 of us, junior brother Lan Ju just so happens to lack a suitable Emperor weapon. Junior brother Zhuo, I think you should be willing to part with this treasure and give it to Lan Ju, right? That's right. After all, your Azura Island's source energy is missing so much. We plan to give you such a rare opportunity. I think you should grasp it well. The moment Lan Ju mentioned that he wanted Zhuowen's Azura battle halberd, the other 5 Sky Capital Peak geniuses chimed in one after another, not putting Zhuowen's opinion in their eyes. It was as if Zhuowen giving the Azura battle halberd to Lan Ju was an honor. On the other hand, Lan Ju slightly raised his chin and revealed a proud smile. He cast a sidelong glance at Zhuowen, looking forward to Zhuowen's tactful performance. Elder Huaxie's eyes flickered, but he didn't speak up to stop them. Clearly, he tacitly approved of Lan Ju's actions. Seeing Lan Ju and the other 5 Sky Capital Peak geniuses speaking one after another without putting him in their eyes, Zhuowen's eyes became even gloomier. He coldly said, "Senior brothers, aren't you going too far? I exchanged my life for this Emperor weapon. How can I hand it over just like that?" The smile on Lan Ju's face faded as he coldly stared at Zhuowen. A terrifying aura firmly locked onto Zhuowen as he coldly said, "You mean, you don't plan to hand it over?" Feeling the sudden increase in pressure, Zhuowen let out a muffled groan. He also unyieldingly released the aura within his body. At the same time, the Azura battle halberd fiercely released its Emperor's pressure to resist the pressure released by Lan Ju. "Not handing it over," Zhuowen decisively said. Hearing Zhuowen's straightforward answer, Lan Ju's pupils shrank. He clapped his hands and laughed in extreme anger. "Good, good, good. This senior brother is kind enough to give you the opportunity to become a disciple in name of Sky Capital Peak, but you don't appreciate it." Saying that, Lan Ju cupped his hands towards Elder Huaxia and said, "Elder, this child has offended his superiors. If I don't teach him a lesson, I'm afraid he will become more and more arrogant in the future. Therefore, Lan Ju hopes that Elder can allow me to teach this child a lesson." "Senior brother Lan Ju, don't go too far. Your actions clearly show that you covet the Azura war halberd in Zhuowen's hands. Don't you feel ashamed of yourself?" Moyan Wushang couldn't help but retort. Lan Ju's expression immediately turned ugly and he said with a cold snort, "Junior apprentice sister Wushang, you are just a nominal disciple. What qualifications do you have to criticize me? Do you want to be removed from the nominal disciple position?" Lan Ju's behavior was obvious. He was indeed coveting Zhuowen's Shura battle halberd, but everyone kept this behavior to themselves. They wouldn't point it out directly. This was to give Lan Ju face. But now, Moyan Wushang didn't give him any face at all and directly exposed Lan Ju's purpose. No matter how thick-skinned Lan Ju was, he was still a little angry. Moyan Wushang's face froze. He wanted to say something but was stopped by the dean. The dean frowned and said, "Hui Xie, I think Lan Ju is too much, right? The Azura battle halberd was originally Zhuowen's possession, and now that Zhuowen was willing to offer it up, it was naturally for the best. Since he's unwilling, there's no need to coerce him, right?" Hearing the dean speak, Elder Hui Xie, who originally wanted to pretend that he didn't see anything, smiled and said, "Bai Yang is right. Lan Ju, since this little guy is unwilling to give up the Azura battle halberd, there's no need to force him." Seeing Elder Hui Xie speak, Lan Ju quickly bowed and said, "Elder is right. I was impulsive. Good. Next time, be more steady. Since Zhuowen is unwilling to give up the Azura battle halberd, then the nominal disciple position is also impossible. You can all disperse." As he spoke, Elder Huaxie glanced at Zhuowen. With a wave of his sleeve, he sat down opposite the dean and prepared for another round of chess. "Wait." Suddenly, Zhuowen, who was originally calm, opened his mouth. Elder Hui Xie frowned and looked at Zhuowen with displeasure. He said, "What else do you want? Actually, it's not impossible to give the Azura battle halberd to this senior, but I have a condition." Zhuowen said with a smile. "Oh, you're willing to give the Azura battle halberd to Lan Ju?" Elder Hui Xie was stunned at first, but then he nodded and continued, "Tell me your condition." I'll fight with Senior Lan Ju. If I lose, I'll give up the Azura battle halberd. If I win, I'll get the nominal disciple position. Zhuowen calmly stated the conditions. However, when these words were spoken, it caused many people in the courtyard to use a strange gaze to look at Zhuowen. In particular, Lan Ju and the other 5 Sky Capital Peak geniuses looked at Zhuowen as though they were looking at an idiot. Could it be that after defeating Emperor Shi, Emperor Ba, and Evil Moon consecutively, this guy's confidence had reached its peak? He actually dared to challenge Lan Ju. Although Lan Ju was the weakest among the 6 disciples sent by Sky Capital Peak, he was still at the first-level Emperor realm. Moreover, geniuses from Jioshan College who had reached the first-level Emperor realm could basically reach the second-level Emperor realm. This was the difference between a genius and an ordinary warrior. Although Lan Ju didn't have an Empyrean weapon, he could easily defeat Evil Moon with his strength alone. Although Zhuowen had defeated Evil Moon, he wouldn't be able to gain an advantage against Lan Ju, who was terrifyingly powerful. He might even suffer a double loss. Even Lan Ju himself was stunned when he heard Zhuowen's condition. However, when he recovered, the corner of his mouth revealed a mocking smile. Wasn't Zhuowen's condition shooting himself in the foot? Zhuowen. Lan Ju is a first-level Emperor Realm warrior. His combat strength is far beyond an ordinary first-level Emperor Realm warrior. He's almost comparable to a second-level Emperor Realm warrior. Do you really intend to fight with him? The Dean's right hand trembled as he frowned slightly. He stared at Zhuowen and tried to persuade him. Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, "Dean, I'm serious this time. If senior brother Lan Ju agrees, we can fight now." As he spoke, Zhuowen suddenly placed the Azura battle halberd in front of him. A sharp fighting intent burst out from his eyes as he stared at Lan Ju. Hearing Zhuowen say this, the Dean also knew that further persuasion was useless. However, he was still worried for Zhuowen in his heart. After all, Lan Ju was indeed stronger than Zhuowen. Zhuowen was only a peak Empyrean. Even if he had the support of an Emperor artifact, the chances of him defeating Lan Ju were extremely low. Haha. I agree to your condition. Lan Ju smiled and slowly walked in front of Zhuowen. He crossed his arms and said with a teasing gaze, "Junior brother Zhuowen, you don't think that you have the qualifications to fight me after having a low-level Emperor weapon and defeating Xie Yu, do you? Even if I don't have an Emperor weapon in my hand, you still have a slim chance of defeating me. I advise you to hand over the Azura battle halberd. This way, you can avoid physical pain." Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Senior brother Lan Ju must be joking. What I'm afraid of is that if senior brother loses to me, you will lose all face. Therefore, senior brother should be mentally prepared." Hearing Zhuowen's slightly teasing words, Lan Ju's gaze suddenly turned cold. He said coldly, "You are very confident. However, confidence often requires sufficient strength to have the qualifications. I want to see where your confidence comes from." As he spoke, Lan Ju took a step forward. Suddenly, wind and clouds gathered in the sky above the courtyard. Dark clouds filled the air and 9 blue Emperor stars descended. The moment the Emperor stars descended, the entire academy was alarmed. Everyone looked at the Emperor stars that had suddenly descended, and their faces revealed a look of astonishment. The Emperor stars have descended. There are Emperor Realm experts fighting. It seems that they are still in our academy. Let's quickly go and take a look. In an instant, countless cultivators around the academy rushed in the direction of the Emperor stars. When they gathered outside the Dean's courtyard, they saw a blue figure slowly rise into the air. 9 huge blue stars were constantly revolving around him in a specific trajectory. That's senior brother Lan Ju of Sky Capital Peak. At this moment, he actually released the Emperor stars. Is he going to fight someone? Seeing the blue figure rise into the air, many of the surrounding students recognized Lan Ju's identity and guessed the purpose of Lan Ju releasing the Emperor stars. The moment Lan Ju rose into the air, another figure appeared not far from Lan Ju. This person held a halberd that was more than 10 feet long and was surrounded by 8 blood seas. His aura was terrifying, but compared to Lan Ju's aura, he was still much weaker. That's Zhuowen. This guy is already at the peak of the heavenly venerable realm. How did he advance so quickly? But is this guy going to fight senior brother Lan Ju now? Is he courting death? Zhuowen, who was opposite Lan Ju, was also recognized by the crowd. Many people were surprised at Zhuowen's rapid cultivation advancement, but even more people had strange expressions on their faces. After all, the scene of Zhuowen and Lan Ju confronting each other was too obvious. These two people were planning to fight. One was a first-level Emperor Realm expert and a genius of the Inner Academy. Although the other was an extremely dazzling existence in the Outer Academy, he was only at the peak of the Heavenly Venerable Realm. In this battle, no matter how one looked at it, Zhuowen would undoubtedly lose. Let's fight. Zhuowen shouted in a low voice and directly used the 3 seals. At the same time, he entered the state of the 4th level of the Bedevilment Realm. His blood hair grew to the soles of his feet. At the same time, the ultimate limitless sword array also surged out. At this moment, Zhuowen could be said to have used all his trump cards. After all, Lan Ju was not Evil Moon. His strength was definitely much stronger than Evil Moon. Without using the Slaughter Abstinence Violation Blade, Zhuowen could only use his full strength. Lan Ju also felt that Zhuowen, who had entered the state of the 4th level of the Bedevilment Realm, his aura was much stronger than before. The contempt on his face slowly faded. With a wave of his right hand, 9 stars suddenly lined up in a horizontal line. Then, Lan Ju stepped out step by step. After a total of 9 steps, he arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. He raised his right hand and one of the blue stars was held in his hand. Then, he slammed it down. Cut. Zhuowen stood quietly in the void. The stars rubbed against the air, forming a violent whistling sound, blowing Zhuowen's long blood-colored hair. He looked like a demon god descending to the world. When the star was about to smash in front of Zhuowen, the Azura halberd in Zhuowen's hand suddenly slashed out. Blood chi erupted, forming a huge blood bridge in the void, blocking in front of the star. Boom. Chapter 1150. Star-devouring art boom. Boom. Looking at the gigantic chasm that had appeared in the sky, many of the surrounding students revealed shocked expressions. The aftermath of the first clash between the two was actually so terrifying. Furthermore, Zhuowen did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Lan Ju also noticed that Zhuowen's power had increased a lot. He frowned and snorted coldly. He raised his hands, and the remaining 8 blue stars fell from the sky and bombarded Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a step back and retreated a few hundred steps when he felt the power of the 8 stars. Then, he moved his body with the halberd. 8 blood seas surged out and wrapped around the 8 stars. Boom. Unfortunately, the power of the 8 blood seas was too weak compared to the 8 stars. They couldn't last long before they were destroyed by the 8 stars. There is an insurmountable gap between the Heavenly Master and the Emperor Realm. You can't compete with me. Lan Ju put his hands behind his back and looked at the 8 blood seas that were crushed in an instant. A smug smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Is that so? Zhuowen took a deep breath. With a flick of his finger, he took out the immortal stone. Surging mental energy and vigorous yuan power continuously flowed into the immortal stone. Through the mysterious array within the immortal stone, the 2 different types of energy finally fused into an even more terrifying immortal energy. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the 7-kill blade from the spirit ring with his left hand. Half of his immortal energy enveloped the 7-kill blade, and the other half enveloped the Azura battle halberd. In an instant, the aura of the 2 weapons rose to the extreme. Life destruction. He used his immortal power to activate the life breaker. Instantly, the milky white immortal power burst forth with an extremely intense light. Then, a gigantic saber shadow hundreds of meters long descended from the void. The saber slashed out horizontally, and the surrounding 8 stars all shattered. What? What kind of power is this? He actually shattered 8 stars in an instant. Lan Ju, who was originally standing with his hands behind his back, was startled when he saw the terrifying blade image in the sky. His eyes widened and he could not help but exclaim. The celestial force that covered the blade image was extremely terrifying, and it faintly caused his heart to tremble. This energy was definitely of a higher level than origin power. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to give him such a fearful feeling. Is that immortal energy? In the courtyard, the dean and Elder Graysheth stood up at the same time. They stared at the milky white halo on the blade shadow. Although they had never seen this power before, they had heard of it. It was said that when mental energy and elemental energy fused together, it would form a higher level of energy. This energy was called immortal energy. Not only is this lad good at martial arts, but his mental strength is also not weak. He has even mastered the fusion of the two powers. Elder Huaxie stared at Zhuowen's figure and muttered to himself with a burning gaze. Huixie, do you still think that Zhuowen is not qualified to become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak? The dean smiled faintly. Elder Huaxie came back to his senses and said in a low voice, "You're right. Being able to grasp immortal energy, this lad is qualified to become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak. We can even make an exception and directly promote him to an official disciple. However, this matter should wait until these two fellows finish their battle." The dean also nodded and stared at Zhuowen with a burning gaze as if he was looking at a precious treasure. Cultivators who could grasp immortal energy were rare in the 9th Netherworld realm. At this moment, Zhuowen could not help but attract his attention. Boom! The blade image sank. Its target was Lan Ju, who was not far away. The whistling wind swept over, causing Lan Ju's expression to become slightly unsightly. Go all out. Star-devouring art, devour. Lan Ju's eyes were filled with coldness. He stomped his foot, and the 9 Emperor stars condensed again. However, this time, Lan Ju did not use the 9 Emperor stars as weapons. Instead, he waved his hands, and the 9 Emperor stars around him suddenly shrank back into his body. His actually devouring Emperor stars? Zhuowen could not help but mutter to himself in surprise when he saw this scene. Devouring Emperor stars, tempering the body. The instant the 9 Emperor stars entered Lan Ju's body, he slammed his hands against his chest. Immediately, the power of the 9 Emperor stars in his body surged out and covered the surface of his body. Lan Ju's eyes were dyed a deep blue under the power of the stars. This guy is using the power of the Emperor stars to temper his body, making it comparable to an Emperor armament for a short period of time. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lan Ju, who was glowing blue all over. This was the first time he had seen the secret technique used by Lan Ju. Using star power as a medium to pour into one's body, it allowed one's body to obtain a strength comparable to an Emperor weapon for a short period of time. Break for me. After doing all this, Lan Ju bent his legs and suddenly stomped on the ground. His entire body shot out like an arrow from a bow. The deep blue color on the surface of his body made him look extremely strange. Boom! With a punch, the blue fist light instantly collided with the blade shadow. Then, white and blue exploded, filling the entire sky. It was as if the entire sky was filled with these two colors at this moment. Boom! 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 The moment his fist came into contact with the blade shadow, Lan Ju's attack poured out like a torrential storm. He actually threw punch after punch at the blade shadow. Moreover, Zhuowen was shocked to find that Lan Ju's fist and the blade shadow collided so fiercely, as if nothing had happened. There was no damage to his fist at all. Sword thunder profound. Zhuowen knew that he could not let Lan Ju continue to attack. Otherwise, the blade shadow would definitely be broken, so he decisively used the sword thunder profound. Lightning swords wrapped around Lan Ju, and terrifying lightning snakes surged out and wrapped around Lan Ju's entire body. Haha. Junior brother Zhuowen, after using the Star Devourer art, my body is comparable to a low-grade Emperor artifact. What can a mere thunderbolt do to me? Lan Ju laughed and shook his arms. The powerful thunderbolt that wrapped around him was directly shattered into nothingness. He punched the blade shadow back, and his cold eyes fell on Zhuowen. Junior brother Zhuowen, it's your turn. The Azura battle halberd in your hand is destined to be mine. Lan Ju sneered and stomped his foot. His whole body was filled with starlight, and he kept running in the void like an ape. He was so fast that only his afterimage could be seen. Just in time. Zhuowen suddenly smiled. The moment Lan Ju arrived in front of him, Zhuoan slashed out with the Azura battle halberd in his hand. Suddenly, the remaining half of his immortal force erupted, pushing the Azura battle halberd's power to the extreme. Just now, when Zhuoan used his immortal force to activate the 7 Killings blade, the power it displayed was enough to threaten Lan Ju. Now, when Zhuoan used his immortal force to activate the Azura battle halberd, its power was much more terrifying than the 7 Killings blade. The Azura battle halberd's slash had the momentum to stir heaven and earth. Lan Ju was extremely confident in his Star Devourer art, so he threw a punch at the Azura battle halberd with his bare hands. However, the moment his right fist came into contact with the Azura battle halberd, his expression changed and became extremely unsightly. This was because the Azura battle halberd had easily pierced through his right fist like it was tofu. Poochie. Blood spurted out from the sky. Lan Ju screamed miserably and retreated. His left hand clutched his right fist that had been smashed to pieces. His eyes were filled with horror. His body had clearly reached the strength of a low-level Emperor artifact under the Star Devourer art. The Azura battle halberd was also a low-level Emperor artifact. How could it so easily turn his right fist into such a sorry state? However, Lan Ju soon noticed the immortal force on the surface of the Azura battle halberd. His pupils shrunk. He knew that the Azura battle halberd's sharpness was very likely due to the immortal force. This guy actually still had this trick up his sleeve. Lan Ju muttered hatefully. "Senior Lan Ju, what are you thinking about? You're so engrossed in your thoughts." A teasing voice sounded in Lan Ju's ears. Then, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. He turned his head abruptly, but what answered him was a large halberd that whistled through the wind. The Azura battle halberd slammed into Lan Ju's chest. Lan Ju spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky like a meteorite. He crashed heavily into the center of the courtyard. Dust filled the field of vision, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. Zhuoan stood thousands of miles high in the sky, silently looking down at the dust-covered figure in the courtyard. He knew that even if Lan Ju's body was comparable to a low-level Emperor artifact, he would still be seriously injured after being hit by the Azura battle halberd that was powered by immortal force. Zhuoan had already won this round. The moment Lan Ju fell into the courtyard, countless spectating students tacitly fell into silence. Even Elder Huaxia, the dean, the other geniuses of Sky Capital Peak, Evil Moon, DIBA, Moyan Wushang and the other top 5 geniuses on the Heavenly Venerate list had tacitly fallen into a daze. Lan Ju had lost just like that. Moreover, he had been defeated under the premise of using his best move, the Star Devourer art. This guy. How did he become so terrifying? Evil Moon clenched his fists tightly. He couldn't help but feel a sense of defeat as he looked at the proud figure in the sky overlooking the courtyard. Back then, the ant that had almost no power to resist him had now defeated Di-Shi, DIBA, Evil Moon, and Sky Capital Peak's genius, Lan Ju. At this moment, the ant in his eyes was standing thousands of miles high in the sky, overlooking him. It was as if he, Evil Moon, had become an insignificant ant. His former role had been swapped with that of Zhuoan. Evil Moon's heart was filled with unwillingness, but it was useless. He had already deeply experienced how big the gap between him and Zhuoan was. Whoosh! There was an uproar in the surroundings. Countless students looked excitedly at the figure standing quietly in the void. This figure had undoubtedly created a record that was even more dazzling than Evil Moon's. Chapter 1151. Emperors Tu Mo Lingtian, Jianan, Gatha, and Xian Xing were among the crowd. When they saw Zhuoan defeat Lan Ju, their minds instantly went blank. It's big brother Zhuo. He defeated the inner yard Emperor stage genius, Lan Ju? Jianan was the first to react. His face was flushed and his lips trembled. His voice was filled with excitement. Although Mo Lingtian, Gatha, and Xian Xing did not speak, the shock on their faces was even greater than Jianan's. They had thought that their own progress was fast enough. They never imagined that Zhuoan would leave them far behind. Swoosh! Zhuoan slowly landed in the courtyard. His eyes were fixed on Elder Huaxia as he said, "Elder Huaxia, I believe that I now have the qualifications to become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak. A clear and melodious voice unhurriedly rang out in the courtyard, breaking the frozen atmosphere in the courtyard. This caused the gazes of everyone in the courtyard to turn towards the calm Zhuo Wen. Swoosh! The 5 geniuses of Sky Capital Peak came to Lan Zhu's side and helped him up. Among them, a white-robed man with tied hair had a sharp gaze. He stared coldly at Zhuo Wen and said, "You still have the face to mention the matter of a nominal disciple? You have injured junior brother Lan Zhu to such an extent. Your methods are so vicious. What qualifications do you have to enter Sky Capital Peak?" "Oh, didn't senior brother Lan Zhu say at the beginning? In our duel, if I lose, I will hand over the Azura battle halberd with both hands. If I win, I will become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak. I believe that all of you heard it right. Now that I have one, are you going to renege on your debt?" Zhuo Wen's eyes turned cold as he icily said, "Our Sky Capital Peak does not need a vicious disciple like you." The white-clothed young man opened his mouth again. However, he was interrupted by Elder Huaxie before he could finish. Elder Huaxie took a deep look at Zhuo Wen. Soon after, he smiled and said, "You are Zhuo Wen, right? Your talent is indeed not bad. You are qualified to become an in-name disciple of Sky Capital Peak. This is the in-name disciple jade token. Take it." With a wave of his sleeve, Elder Huaxie took out a jade talisman and handed it to Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen received the jade talisman. His eyes were extremely calm and there was no other expression on his face. In his opinion, he deserved this jade talisman. "Elder, this." The white-clothed young man's expression froze slightly as he involuntarily opened his mouth to speak. Needless to say, Lan Zhu should be willing to admit defeat and not let you act shamelessly. Elder Huaxie coldly snorted. With a wave of his sleeve, he directly left the courtyard. When the white-clothed young man heard Elder Huaxie's words, he could only remain silent in embarrassment. He viciously glared at Zhuo Wen before leading Lan Zhu and the rest out of the courtyard with Elder Huaxie. "Zhuo Wen, it seems like you have gained quite a lot from the origin battle in the outside world." The dean laughed out loud as he approached Zhuo Wen. His eyes were filled with satisfaction. Zhuo Wen's performance had greatly exceeded his expectations. It could even be said that it had given him a great surprise. Not only had Zhuo Wen defeated the #1 heavenly sovereign, Xie Yu, but he had also defeated Lan Zhu, an Emperor Realm genius from the inner yard. The dean was naturally pleasantly surprised. Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin also came to Zhuo Wen's side. The two of them looked at Zhuo Wen with admiration. The strength that Zhuo Wen had displayed had indeed surprised the two of them. On the other hand, Xie Yu, Diba, and Di Shi, who had been left to the side, were constantly changing their expressions. With a cold snort, they left the courtyard. It was meaningless for them to stay there, so they might as well leave. Zhuo Wen did not pay attention to Xie Yu and the other two who had left. Instead, he continued to chat with the dean and the other two. "Dean, may I know when the Sky Capital Peak disciples will enter the inner yard?" Zhuo Wen suddenly asked with a smile. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Zhuo Wen desired to enter the inner yard more than anyone else because there was a beautiful figure that he had always wanted to pursue. The dean shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be so soon. Some of the other disciples in the outer yard still need to undergo other tests. You will have to wait a little longer. Moreover, Hui Xie and the others have another purpose for coming here." Another purpose? Zhuo Wen was startled. Soon after, an interested expression appeared in his eyes. Elder Huaxie had brought along 6 Sky Capital Peak geniuses this time around, which was indeed a little excessive. It turned out that he had another motive other than recruiting in-name disciples. "Do you know that there is an emperor's tomb at the center of the Misery Sea?" the dean asked in a low voice. "Emperor's tomb? What's that?" Zhuo Wen was stunned. It was the first time that he had heard of this so-called Emperor's Tomb. Emperor's Tomb. As the name implies, it is the tomb of Emperor Realm experts. This Emperor's Tomb is very famous in the Misery Sea. It's normal that you don't know about it since you have just arrived in the Misery Sea, Moyan Wushang suddenly said. The dean nodded and said, Wushang is right. The Emperor's tomb is the tomb of Emperor Realm experts. Countless Emperor Realm experts are buried there. According to legend, the Emperor's tomb was once the most prosperous and largest island in the Misery Sea. It was also the most powerful force in the Misery Sea. This island is called the Emperor Domain. It is a terrifying force that is comparable to the great forces in the 9th Netherworld realm. The number of Emperor Realm experts there is no less than that of the Inner Yard. There are even sage-to-be existences there. When the Emperor Domain existed, it ruled the entire Misery Sea. That was a long time ago. At that time, the Outer Yard had not opened up the wonderful God Island in the Misery Sea. However, for some reason, the Emperor Domain disappeared overnight and sank into the depths of the Misery Sea. The reason is even more mysterious. After the Emperor Domain sank into the Misery Sea, a strange and deathly silent building would emerge from the bottom of the Misery Sea every 300 years. We called that building the Emperor's Tomb. There are many inheritances of Emperor Realm experts in the Emperor's Tomb. There is even the existence of the Emperor's Heart. It is said that this thing can directly promote a heavenly venerable realm expert to the Emperor Realm. It is an extremely heaven-defying thing. In addition, there are many Emperor weapons, cultivation methods, spiritual medicines, and many other treasures that are not available in the outside world. The Emperor's Tomb can be said to be a warrior's paradise. You can get everything that you can't normally get in there. Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He said in a deep voice, "Dean, do you mean that the other goal of Elder Huaxia's group is the Emperor's Tomb in the center of the Misery Sea?" "Yes. Not only Elder Huaxia, but all the warriors on the countless islands in the Misery Sea will gather at the center of the Misery Sea on the day the Emperor's Tomb appears," the Dean said seriously. "Emperor's Tomb? Dean, may I know when the Emperor's Tomb will appear?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. "Soon. Approximately 3 months later. Huaxia plans to bring the nominal disciples back to the Inner Academy after 3 months in the Emperor's Tomb. Therefore, if you want to go to the Inner Academy, you can only do so after the Emperor's Tomb. However, with your strength and talent, you can enter the Emperor's Tomb and give it a try. Perhaps, you will be able to obtain some opportunities." The Dean shook his head and said with a bitter smile. "Thank you for your reminder, Dean. I will give it a try after 3 months." Zhuowen cupped his hands together. After discussing some specific matters regarding the Emperor's Tomb with the Dean, he left the courtyard. What made Zhuowen feel somewhat helpless was that Moyan Wushang and Qingyin actually followed behind him like 2 followers. "Miss Wushang, Miss Qingyin, is there anything else?" Zhuowen stopped and looked at the 2 girls as he asked. "Zhuowen, you are so strong and talented. Why don't you come with us to the Emperor's Tomb in 3 months? That way, we can take care of each other." Before Moyan Wushang could say anything, Soft Note hurriedly stated her purpose. Although Moyan Wushang did not speak, the hope in her beautiful eyes showed that she had the same idea as Qingyin. Hearing this, Zhuowen pondered for a moment and nodded, "Okay. However, before going to the Emperor's Tomb, I have something to do. I don't know if I can make it in time for the Emperor's Tomb to open in 3 months. If I can, I will definitely look for the 2 of you. What do you have that is more important than the Emperor's Tomb?" Qingyin asked curiously. Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes flashed and said, "Zhuowen, are you planning to return to the Qing Xian Empire?" Zhuowen didn't reply. He nodded lightly, but his sharp gaze was fixed in a certain direction. That direction was where the Qing Xian Empire was located. Back then, Zhuowen wasn't strong enough and was forced to flee pathetically by the Qing Emperor. Now that Zhuowen had the strength to kill second-level martial emperors, he naturally planned to return to the Qing Xian Empire to take revenge. Moreover, Zhuowen was worried about the situation of Lu Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan. After all, the 2 of them had left on the bronze paper kites and should not have gone too far. In addition, the 2 of them were heavily injured and they were still in the territory of the Qing Xian Empire. Zhuowen was really worried that the 2 of them would be caught by the Qing Emperor. "Then I will go with you." Moyan Wushang bit her lower lip and said softly. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "This is my own matter. Miss Wushang, it is better for you not to get involved. When the Emperor's Tomb opens and I am not back yet,
if Mo Lingtian, Jianan and the others also intend to enter, I hope that Miss Wushang can take care of them." Seeing that Zhuowen had rejected her, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of sadness. She forced a smile and said, "Don't worry, I will take care of the 4 of them for you." "Thank you very much, Miss Wushang." Zhuowen cupped his hands gratefully and immediately took a step forward. He broke through the sky and left the academy. "Hey! Why is this guy leaving so quickly? Where is he going?" Qingyin looked at the figure that broke through the sky and her beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. She could not help but ask Moyan Wushang. Moyan Wushang shook his head and said, "Qingyin, this is Zhuowen's private matter. It is better for us not to ask." Hearing this, Qingyin pouted and said hatefully, "If you don't ask, then don't ask. This guy is always so mysterious. Let's go. We will wait for the Emperor's tomb to open in 3 months. Perhaps we will be able to obtain an opportunity and break through the shackles of the heavenly sovereign and advance to imperial power," Moyan Wushang said with a smile. "You are right. Now we have to prepare for the battle of the Emperor's tomb. This is a crucial opportunity for us to advance to imperial power." Chapter 1152. Back to Qing Xian. After leaving the academy, Zhuowen summoned Xiang, Bai Mai, and Huang Liang through the communication jade token. He planned to bring all 5 of them back to the Qing Xian Empire. Swoosh, swoosh. Master. In a spacious street in the main city, Ziyang, together with Bai Mai, Huang Liang, Guanghan, and Xie, landed in front of Zhuowen, kneeled on one knee, and said respectfully in unison. At this moment, the 5 of them, including Xiang, were looking at Zhuowen with reverence. Xiang had already told Bai Mai and the other 3 about what had happened on Azura Island. Zhuowen was able to kill Xue Tu-fu, who was a 2nd-level emperor, even though he had yet to reach the emperor realm. Even in the 9 Netherworld realm, where experts were as common as clouds, such a battle record would make him a monstrous genius. Ziyang and the other 4 all felt that it was worth it to follow such a monstrous genius with a limitless future. Currently, they were already willing to become Zhuowen's servants from the bottom of their hearts. "Follow me to the Qing Xian Empire," Zhuowen said indifferently. He flicked his sleeves and walked along the street toward the city gate. Xiang and the other 4 shuddered when they heard this. They knew that Zhuowen was going to take revenge and settle the score with Emperor Qing. The 5 of them looked at each other and followed Zhuowen silently. When the 6 of them arrived at the dock, Zhuowen took out the Sun-Moon shuttle and opened the cabin door. After letting Xiang into the back seat, he said to Bai Mai and the other 3, "The 4 of you go to the dock and buy tickets to the desolate ancient city. We will meet there." After saying that, Zhuowen entered the Sun-Moon shuttle. After starting it up, the Sun-Moon shuttle shot into the sky like a shooting star, rushing towards the depths of the bitter sea. The blue tail of the shuttle dragged long in the air, looking extremely dazzling. Bai Mai and the other 3 looked enviously at the Sun-Moon shuttle that was heading toward the depths of the Sea of Misery. The 4 of them quickly walked to the dock and bought tickets to the desolate ancient city. "Master, with the speed of the Sun and Moon shuttle, it will take about 10 days to reach the ancient barren city. But if Bai Mai and the other 3 take the boundless sailboat, it will take about 15 days. In the back seat, Xiang whispered to Zhuowen. "Then let's wait in the desolate ancient city for 5 days." Zhuowen nodded. After discussing some matters with Xiang, his mind sank into his sea of consciousness. He intended to use this period of time to study the river diagram array in the Jade Cauldron. After all, the might of the river diagram formation that Master Mu Feng revealed earlier was truly terrifying, and Zhuowen naturally had no reason to not cultivate it. However, Zhuowen still found it a little strange that Master Mu Feng wanted him to cultivate the river diagram array in such a hurry. However, this strange thought only flashed through his mind. Zhuowen's mind was completely focused on the river diagram array. The desolate ancient city was still bustling with flowers and streams of people. The Sea of Bitterness was a stark contrast to the bustling desolate ancient city. Swoosh! An air-rending sound burst out from the Sea of Bitterness. The sharp whistling sound immediately attracted the attention of many warriors in the ancient city. When they discovered that the Sun and Moon shuttle had broken through the Sea of Bitterness,
A startled look appeared in their eyes. Is that the sun and moon shuttle? I wonder which lord has come to the desolate ancient city from the other side of the Sea of Bitterness. When they saw that the sun and moon shuttle had arrived in the desolate ancient city, countless warriors broke out into whispers. Their eyes were filled with anticipation, as they wanted to see the true face of the warriors in the sun and moon shuttle. Creak. The door of the shuttle opened, and two figures appeared in front of the crowd. The person in the lead was dressed in a long black robe. He looked extremely young, no more than 22 years old. The other person was dressed in a purple robe. He was also quite young, about 27 or 28 years old. Moreover, what made many people in the desolate ancient city fearful was that the aura of these two people was extremely powerful and terrifying, especially the purple-clothed youth behind the black-robed man. The emperor's aura that he unintentionally exuded made many people's hearts tremble. On the other hand, the black-robed youth's cultivation should be at the peak of the heavenly master realm. However, the purple-clothed youth, whose cultivation should be at the emperor realm, was obediently following behind the black-robed youth. Needless to say, the black-robed youth should be the master. After putting away the sun and moon shuttle, Zhuowen ignored the surrounding warriors and found an inn in the desolate ancient city with Xiang. He planned to wait here for 5 days. 5 days passed by slowly. During this period of time, Zhuowen had basically been comprehending the river diagram formation. Master Mufeng had already passed down the detailed technique of the river diagram formation to Zhuowen a long time ago, so during this half a month of time, Zhuowen didn't have the slightest feeling of stagnation when cultivating the river diagram formation, and it was instead extremely smooth. On the 5th day, Bai Mai, Huang Liang, and the other two arrived at the desolate ancient city on the boundless sailboat. Through the communication jade token, they met up with Zhuowen and Xiang in the inn. In the inn, Zhuowen looked at Bai Mai, Huang Liang, Guanghan, and Xie with a satisfied expression. The four of them had made good progress in their cultivation. They had all reached the peak of the heavenly master realm, the same cultivation as Zhuowen. Of course, in terms of combat strength, the four of them could not catch up. Master. Emperor Qing is an outer elder of the Azure Dragon main palace. Although his position in the main palace is quite low, he is still a member of the main palace. He must have some powerful trump cards in his hands and knows some people in the main palace. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to deal with Emperor Qing when we return this time, Xiang said with some concern. Zhuowen nodded and said, I know about this too. However, I have another reason for returning to the Qing Xian Empire this time. I want to find Brother Hantian and Elder Shuyuan. I also want to see if there is a chance to save my father. Thinking of Zhuo Xiaotian, Zhuowen's eyes showed a trace of sadness. He was getting closer and closer to the imperial power realm. He could feel Zhuo Xiaotian's strength. Zhuo Xiaotian's cultivation was most likely at the high-level imperial realm, which was much stronger than Emperor Qing. However, Zhuo Xiaotian was willing to be sealed in the 18th level of the imperial city dungeon by Emperor Qing. Obviously, this was related to his mother's secret. Therefore, when he returned this time, he had to find out everything. Who is my mother? Sighing in his heart, Zhuowen slowly got up and stepped out of the inn. Xiang and the other four looked at each other and followed behind him silently without hesitation. Outside the desolate ancient city, there were many ancient formations. These ancient formations were teleportation formations that were connected to other regions of the Eastern Land. Among them, there was a teleportation formation that led to the Azure Xian Empire. After paying a certain amount of spiritual stones, Zhuowen and his group of 6 gradually disappeared in the light of the teleportation formation. In a small town at the border of the Azure Xian Empire, 6 mysterious figures in long black robes appeared in a ray of light. As soon as the 6 of them appeared, they flew towards the imperial city of the Azure Xian Empire. These 6 people were Zhuowen and his group. When they set off for the Azure Xian Empire, they were dressed like this, mainly to fool others. With the cultivation of Zhuowen and his group, it was easy for them to reach the imperial city from the border of the Azure Xian Empire. Furthermore, the moment Zhuowen arrived at the Azure Xian Empire, he activated the communication jade amulet of the Flame Emperor of the Yang Xian Empire. He told the Flame Emperor some things and the two of them reached an agreement. Back then, when Zhuowen's identity was recognized by the Flame Emperor, the two of them had an agreement. That was, once Zhuowen succeeded in his studies and wanted to return to the Azure Shen Empire to seek revenge, the Flame Emperor would lend him a hand. Of course, the Flame Emperor would not help Zhuowen for free. What he wanted was almost half of the resources and 1/3 of the territory of the Azure Shen Empire. Although the conditions were harsh, Zhuowen still agreed. He knew that it would be difficult for him to conquer the Azure Shen Empire alone. He had to borrow the power of the Flame Emperor. Furthermore, Zhuowen believed that the Flame Emperor must have found out about some of his deeds in the outer yard through Mo Lingtian. With the talent and potential that Zhuowen had displayed, the Flame Emperor would definitely befriend him and help him conquer the Azure Shen Empire. After receiving the Flame Emperor's affirmative reply, Zhuowen and his group of 6 headed to the Imperial City. He planned to wait quietly in the Imperial City. He, Zhuowen, must destroy the Azure Shen Empire with his own hands. The Imperial City was still as bustling as before, with streams of people flowing through it. Zhuowen's group of 6 paid the entrance fee and entered the Imperial City. Naturally, Zhuowen had also used the 100 transformation divine art to change his appearance. After all, Zhuowen had done so many sensational things in the Imperial City that many cultivators would be able to recognize him. If he did not change his appearance, he would undoubtedly be courting death. After finding an inn, the 6 of them gathered around a table. Zhuowen said in a low voice, "The Flame Emperor is preparing to recruit and will need about half a month's time. Moreover, the Flame Emperor also plans to bring the experts of the Azure Shen Empire to the Imperial City to meet with us. Therefore, we will wait quietly for half a month and do not act rashly." Xiang and the other 4 nodded solemnly. The 5 of them had followed the Azure Emperor for a long time and had some understanding of how terrifying the Azure Emperor was. Although the Azure Emperor was a second-level martial emperor, he was an outer elder of the Azure Dragon main palace and had some trump cards. In addition, the Azure Emperor was a scheming fellow. Therefore, it would be difficult to deal with such an existence. During this period of time, the 5 of you help me pay attention to the news about Lu Hantian and Elder Sheyuan. Once there is news about them, inform me immediately, Zhuowen said solemnly. Yes, Master. Xiang and the other 4 nodded. After discussing for a while, each of them left their communication jade tokens and walked out of the inn to gather information. On the other hand, Zhuowen was strolling on the streets of the royal capital. Looking at the familiar buildings around him, his eyes were filled with emotions. It had been 2 years since he was forced to leave the Qing Shen Empire. Although the royal capital hadn't changed in these 2 years, the people had changed. When Zhuowen walked past the corner of the street, he saw a rather magnificent building from the corner of his eye. Then, his right foot stiffened in mid-air. The building at the corner was a pavilion that occupied a large area. In front of the Vermilion Gate, there were 2 groups of gorgeously dressed ladies who were enthusiastically soliciting passers-by. Chapter 1153. Every year changes Drunken Spring Pavilion. Zhuowen muttered the 3 words on the signboard in a low voice, but the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. When he had first entered the Imperial City, he had stayed in the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Zhuowen could still vividly remember the people he met in the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Mother Shu, Lu Moyan Wushang, and Mu Chunxue. At that time, Mu Chunxue had changed her name to Mu Shui. I wonder how she is doing in the inner academy. Zhuowen's gaze gradually became blurred as he softly muttered with a smile. Young master, why don't you enter the Drunken Spring Pavilion to play? Suddenly, at the entrance of the Drunken Spring Pavilion, a gorgeously dressed lady walked in front of Zhuowen and grabbed his right hand, intending to pull him into the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. With a wave of his right hand, a wave of energy gushed out. The lady was instantly forced to take a few steps back as she looked at Zhuowen with a frightened gaze. All right, I'll go in and play. Zhuowen nodded, brushed past the lady, and entered the Drunken Spring Pavilion. The attire inside the Drunken Spring Pavilion had not changed much compared to 2 years ago. Everything was the same as before. However, the beautiful lady who guarded the entrance was no longer there, and the shy Luer was also no longer there. All that entered Zhuowen's eyes were strangers. Miss Miao is performing today. Let's go take a look. Really? Since it's Miss Miao, we have to go take a look. However, I heard that the third prince of the imperial city, Huangfu Wook, is also here. Yes. Prince Wook came especially for Miss Miao. It's said that he plans to bring Miss Miao into the harem in front of everyone today. Then Miss Miao is going to suffer. Prince Wook is famous for being fickle. Once she's brought into the harem, I'm afraid that she will soon be neglected. The conversation between the two attracted Zhuowen's attention. His eyes flashing, Zhuowen followed the flow of people towards the Windflower district. Zhuowen had heard of this Huangfu Wook before. Amongst the many princes of the imperial family, his talent was only below that of Huangfu Wuji and Huangfu Wudao. However, Huangfu Wook was still young and his cultivation wasn't high, thus he hadn't been able to participate in the Blue Emperor proclamation. In the center of the Windflower region, there was still a stage that took up a lot of space. Around the stage, there were many pavilions and pavilions. These pavilions were already filled with people. Those who could sit in the pavilions were basically the high-ranking officials and dignitaries of the Qing Xian Empire. However, among these pavilions, there was a tallest building. At the edge of the building, there were soldiers in armor surrounding the building. Their cold gazes were fixed on the surroundings. Within the building, a 19-year-old youth sat on a chair that was decorated with jewels. In front of him, there was a golden table with various vegetables and fruits on it. Beside the youth stood two elders in long robes. The auras of these two elders weren't weak and their eyes were filled with a frightening glow. Zhuowen saw that quite a number of people in the surroundings had gathered their gazes on the young man. At the same time, they were also emitting traces of whispers. He knew that the young man sitting on the jeweled chair should be Huangfu Wook. Huangfu Wook's cultivation level was not very high. He was roughly at the mystique venerable realm. However, the two elders behind Huangfu Wook had pretty good cultivation levels. They were both at the golden venerable realm. Back then, the Qing Emperor announced to the public that there were only 5 heavenly supremes in the imperial family. In reality, other than Xiang and the other 4, there should be other heavenly supremes. It's just that they haven't revealed themselves yet. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He had heard many things about the Qing Emperor's imperial family from Xiang. He knew that the Qing Emperor wasn't simple. Hence, when he returned to the Qing Xian Empire this time, Zhuowen was extremely cautious. After waiting for a while, the large curtain at the back of the central stage was suddenly pulled open slowly. Soon after, numerous graceful female dancers began to dance gracefully on the stage, just like butterflies dancing freely in a cluster of flowers. There were about 30 dancers lined up at the edge of the stage. Their graceful dance and melodious music filled the eyes and ears of the surrounding people at this moment. Suddenly, the sound of the zither stopped. After 10 breaths of time, the resounding sound of the zither suddenly rang out. Then, a figure that was like a dazzling butterfly among 10,000 flowers floated out from behind the curtain and landed in the center of the stage. Lady Miao is on stage. Ever since Lady Moyan Wushang mysteriously disappeared from the Drunken Spring Pavilion, only Lady Miao's dance can be compared to Lady Wushang. The moment this stunning figure appeared in the center of the stage, the surrounding crowd burst into an uproar. Many people revealed a trace of infatuation in their eyes. Even Huangfu Wook's eyes flickered with excitement when he saw this figure appear. It was as if he had seen a peerless treasure. When Zhuowen's gaze also landed on this lady, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of astonishment. This lady was wrapped in a light green luxurious dress with a white gauze on the outside, revealing the beautiful lines of her neck and clearly visible collarbones. The creases of her dress were like snow. Moonlight flowed gently on the ground. It was more than 3 feet long, causing her gait to be even more graceful and beautiful. Her long black hair was tied up with a hairband and a butterfly hairpin. A strand of black hair hung in front of her chest. She had a thin layer of makeup, which only added color. The faintly discernible redness on her cheeks created a kind of delicate and cute pure skin that was like a flower petal. Her entire person was like a butterfly fluttering in the wind, and also like a clear and transparent ice. This lady's temperament was like ethereal flowing water, giving people a spacious and comfortable feeling. Even Zhuowen's gaze almost sank into her at first glance. However, when Zhuowen's gaze moved up and landed on this lady's exquisite face, a trace of astonishment appeared in his eyes. "It's Lu Er," Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. This lady was 17 or 18 years old. Although more than 2 years had passed, Zhuowen still recognized this lady as the somewhat immature Miao Lu from back then. Back then, when Zhuowen had just entered the Drunken Spring Pavilion, it was Lu Er who had led him to the Shuiyu area's lodgings. At that time, Lu Er was only about 15 years old, and was still an ignorant girl. Now that 2 years had passed, she had actually become so slender and elegant. The current Miao Lu, even Zhuowen felt a trace of amazement. It seemed that the saying a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood wasn't just for show. Miao Lu's figure was so soft that it was as if there were no bones. When she slightly danced, it gave people a kind of gentle beauty. The audience couldn't help but be immersed in Miao Lu's graceful dance. Accompanied by the melodious sound of the zither, the audience entered a strange state. Zhuowen quietly stood in the crowd, admiring Miao Lu's dance. Experiencing the state of the dance, he couldn't help but feel a trace of admiration in his heart. Miao Lu's dance was actually not inferior to Moyan of Wushang's. The only difference should be the cultivation of the two. As the song ended, Miao Lv's graceful dance also came to an end. However, the crowd felt that it wasn't enough. When the zither music finally stopped, the crowd began to applaud and cheer in unison, praising Miao Lv's dance as unparalleled under the heavens. Standing in the middle of the stage, Miao Lu's slender jade-like hands were placed on her shoulders. She slightly bowed to the surrounding people, then lightly opened her vermilion lips and said in a clear voice, "This little girl is willing to present another song to everyone. I wonder if everyone is willing to listen to this song of mine." Miss Miao Lu took the initiative to present a song. "How can we not reward her?" Huang Fu Wook slowly stood up, the corners of his mouth revealing a scholarly smile as he spoke in a clear voice. The people around the stage also agreed. They were all willing to listen to the song that Miao Lu took the initiative to present. Then, "Thank you very much for giving me this honor." Miao Lu slightly bowed and merely nodded to Huang Fu Wook. After that, she no longer paid any attention to him. This caused Huang Fu Wook's expression to become slightly awkward, and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. At that moment, another group of people walked out from the curtain. There were 10 people in this group, and they were all burly men with bulging muscles. These 10 burly men each carried a large drum that was half the height of a person. Boom, boom, boom. Under Miao Lu's command, the 10 burly men very tacitly started to beat the drums. The distant sound of the drums started to spread out from the center of the stage. The sound of the drums contained boundless excitement and was also filled with boundless sorrow and victory songs. It was as if the moment the drums were raised, the stage was no longer a stage, but a battlefield. On the battlefield, the sound of drums, the clashing of weapons, the neighing of horses, and the cries of warriors. Everyone was immersed in the sound of the drums. It was as if they were in the middle of a battlefield. Their hearts also started to beat violently, and their gazes were also filled with excitement. While drunk, I look at the sword under the lamp. In my dreams, I blow the horn and link the camp. 800 miles under my command, 50 bowstrings flipping over the Great Wall. On the battlefield, soldiers gather in the autumn. The horses fly quickly, the bow is like a thunderbolt, the string is frightening. Accomplishing the matters of the world, winning fame in life and death. A melodious song slowly came out from Miao Lu's cherry lips. The clear and melodious voice of a beauty formed a sharp contrast with the vigorous and intense sound of the drums. It set off the sorrow and helplessness of the battlefield. For a moment, a trace of sorrow appeared in the hearts of countless people, and mist started to spread out from their eyes. This girl, listening to the sound of the drums and Miao Lu's clear and melodious voice, Zhuowen, who was in the crowd, smiled. His eyes revealed a trace of emotion. This song was the song that Zhuowen sang when he opened the morning bell and evening drum for Moyan Wushang. He did not expect that this little girl, Miao Lu, would actually remember this song and even make an adaptation. While everyone was still immersed in this tragic song, Miao Lv's voice slowly faded away. However, there was a trace of sadness in her beautiful eyes. 2 years ago, she once looked at that domineering and unruly figure below the stage. He struck the morning bell and evening drum and passionately sang this song. This song was something that Miao Lu would never be able to forget. Thus, after that day, she memorized this song and worked hard to learn how to dance and sing. Finally, today, she brought this song to the stage where that figure stood 2 years ago. Flowers are the same every year, but people are different every year. Chapter 1154. Huang Fu Wook Pa Pa Pa. Applause suddenly resounded on the spacious stage. Huang Fu Wook stood up and said in a clear voice, "Lady Miao Lu, this song is impassioned and goes straight to the heart. It's wonderful, wonderful. For Miss Miao to be able to compose such a song, I'm full of admiration." Many of the martial artists on the stage also nodded in agreement. This song had indeed resonated with their hearts, causing them to be immersed in the artistic conception of the battlefield. Miao Lv bowed slightly, but shook her head. Miao Lv didn't create this song. Oh, it wasn't Miss Miao who created it. Which expert created it? Huang Fu Wook was startled at first, but then he asked with a smile. Zhuowen. Miao Lv said indifferently. Once these words were spoken, the entire stage fell into silence. Even Huang Fu Wook's expression froze. The name Zhuowen had already become a taboo in the Qing Xian Empire. This was because not only had he killed the first prince, Huang Fu Wudao, in front of everyone in the imperial capital, disobeying the will of the Azure Emperor, he had even trespassed into the imperial capital's dungeon and released many criminals. Back then, almost all the martial artists in the Qing Xian Empire knew about the battle between Zhuowen and the Azure the Arch. That battle was tragic and shocking. The 5 heavenly venerables of the imperial city had all been killed by Zhuowen alone. Even though Zhuowen had lost against the Azure Emperor, it was an extremely glorious defeat. This was because Zhuowen had forced the Azure Emperor to use his Life Emperor weapon to deal with him. Although Zhuowen had lost this battle, it was still a glorious defeat. At that time, Zhuowen was merely a supreme being. With such a cultivation, it was already an extremely exaggerated miracle for him to kill 5 heavenly venerables and force the Azure Emperor to use his natal emperor artifact, the Peach Blossom Diagram. Just imagine, which supreme being in the Azure Mystic Empire could kill heavenly venerables and even have the qualifications to exchange blows with a sovereign realm cultivator? How dare you mention Zhuowen's name? You deserve to die. The armored soldiers surrounding Huang Fu Wook's pavilion all drew their weapons. Their gazes were eerily cold as they stared at Miao Lv. Killing intent filled the entire stage, causing quite a few people's expressions to change slightly. They could not help but back away. Facing the murderous soldiers in front of her, Miao Lv smiled and said fearlessly, "What? Do I have to be killed even if I tell the truth?" Huang Fu Wook furrowed his brows slightly. He slowly placed his hands behind his back and said to Miao Lv, "Miss Miao Lv, the name Zhuowen is a taboo. I think you know the consequences of saying this name in public, right?" Miao Lu sneered, "So what if he knows? So what if he didn't know?" This breaking array was created by Big Brother Zhuowen. Back then, Big Brother Zhuowen made a bet here with the second prince Huang Fu Wuji. In the end, he used this breaking array to successfully switch the morning bell and evening drum, winning the bet. "Isn't this the truth? Your Highness, this girl is too daring. She actually dared to mention the taboo word again and again. If we don't kill her, we won't be able to explain ourselves." An old man beside Huang Fu Wook narrowed his eyes and coldly said. Huang Fu Wook shook his head. Soon after, he stared at Miao Lv and said with a smile, "Miss Miao, you also know that by saying the taboo word Zhuowen, you have already angered everyone. How about this? I have a way to let you off the hook. If you are willing to become my concubine, I will not blame you for mentioning the taboo word again and again. How about it?" Huang Fu Wook said with a light smile. Miao LV slightly raised her head. Her watery eyes emitted a cold light as she disdainfully said, "Third prince, compared to your two elder brothers, you are far inferior. Not to mention big brother Zhuoan. I would rather die than become your concubine." Hearing these words, a vein popped out on Huang Fu Wook's forehead. He coldly said, "Don't compare me to that bastard Zhuoan. That guy is nothing more than a stray dog. He was forced to leave the Qing Xian Empire by Emperor Qing. That stray dog has probably already died in a foreign land. How can a dead person compare to me? You are indeed unable to compare to Big Brother Zhuoan. You can't even compare to a single hair on his head. Comparing you to him is simply an insult to him." Miao LV replied without the slightest fear. Good, good, good. You have forced me to do this." Huang Fu Wook flew into a rage. He pointed at Miao LV and said to the surrounding soldiers, "Capture her. Be careful not to hurt her." "Yes, Your Highness." Over 10 armored soldiers rushed onto the stage like monkeys. The spears in their hands emitted a cold light as they pointed at Miao LV in the center. Huang Fu Wook's eyes emitted a perverted light as he thought to himself, "Miao LV, once you fall into my hands, don't even think about escaping. You will be at my mercy. Hee hee. Lady Miao is in danger." Huang Fu Wook's motive for coming here was originally not pure. Now, Huang Fu Wook has even more reason to capture her. Many people in the surrounding frowned. Although they disliked Huang Fu Wook's actions, no one stood out. After all, Huang Fu Wook was a prince of the imperial family. Once he was offended, the consequences would be unimaginable. Looking at the approaching soldiers, Miao LV's beautiful eyes were filled with vigilance. However, she did not retreat. Hidden in her right sleeve was a dagger that emitted a cold light. She knew that with her low cultivation, she was definitely not a match for these soldiers and Huang Fu Wook. Once she was captured, she did not even need to think to know that her fate would be extremely miserable. Rather than being humiliated to death by Huang Fu Wook, she would rather commit suicide. However, it was a pity that she would not be able to see that unforgettable figure again before she died. "I am already satisfied to be able to sing Big Brother Zhuo's song once again," Miao LV softly muttered. She waved her right hand and the dagger flew towards her own chest. "Stop her!" Huang Fu Wook shouted. He naturally noticed Miao LV's suicidal actions. Immediately, over 10 soldiers shouted and rushed towards Miao LV, wanting to stop her from committing suicide. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly flew over. Then, Miao LV felt that her right hand that was holding the dagger was grabbed by a broad and thick hand. The dagger in her hand was also snatched away. At the same time, the 10 or so soldiers who were rushing over felt a terrifying gust of wind blow towards them. Then, they involuntarily spat out mouthfuls of blood and flew backwards. They heavily smashed onto the ground below the stage. Their bodies rolled as they groaned in pain. "Who are you?" Miao LV was startled at first. Then, her beautiful eyes were filled with vigilance as she stared at Zhuoan and asked coldly. She had never seen this young man before. However, for some reason, this person gave her a rather familiar feeling. "Little girl, you led the way for me at the Drunken Spring Pavilion for so long. Don't you recognize me?" Zhuoan tilted his head. The muscles on his face twitched slightly as he revealed a trace of a gentle smile towards Miao LV. "You are Big Brother Zhuoan." Miao LV was startled at first. Then, she revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. She actually managed to see the person she wanted to see the most at the last moment. At this moment, happiness came too suddenly for her. "Who are you? How dare you obstruct the imperial family's business?" Huang Fu Wook coldly looked down at Zhuoan and angrily shouted. "The person who will kill you." Zhuoan withdrew his gaze from Miao LV and indifferently glanced at Huang Fu Wook. His clear and melodious voice resounded throughout the entire stage. "Kill me. What a joke. Xianming elders, kill this arrogant brat." Huang Fu Wook was so angry that he laughed as he ordered the 2 elders beside him. "Your Highness, don't worry. This brat will definitely die." The 2 elders laughed sinisterly. Then, The aura of the golden exalted realm gushed out as they flew towards Zhuowen. Each of them used their strongest moves to greet Zhuowen. Whoosh! Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent. He stomped his foot and shot out like an arrow from a bow. In an instant, he brushed past the two elders. The seven murders blade had unknowingly appeared in his hand and he unnoticeably slashed out twice. Slash! Slash! The two elders' figures suddenly froze in midair. Then, two pillars of blood violently shot out. Next, the two elders' necks hissed as they fell from midair and heavily smashed onto the ground. They struggled for a while before they died with their eyes wide open. What? The Xianming elders died just like that. Huangfu Wu's body trembled as he looked at the Xianming elders, who were killed as soon as they attacked. He was practically stunned on the spot. Whoosh! At this moment, Zhuowen was like a gust of wind as he arrived in front of Huangfu Wu. His right hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed Huangfu Wu's neck. The difference between the two of them was too great. Huangfu Wu was simply not a match for Zhuowen. He could only passively allow Zhuowen to grab him. Who exactly are you? I'm a prince of the imperial family. Do you dare to take the risk of offending the imperial family to kill me? Huangfu Wu's face was pale and his entire body trembled. However, he still used the imperial family to threaten Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen completely ignored Huangfu Wu and said indifferently, "It's precisely because you're a member of the imperial family that I intend to kill you." You, Huangfu Wu's gaze focused. Just as he was about to speak, Zhuowen's right hand suddenly exerted force and a valiant origin energy exploded out. The clear sound of bones breaking resounded. Huangfu Wu didn't even let out a groan before his neck bent and he completely lost his breath. Bang! After killing Huangfu Wu, Zhuowen swung his right hand and casually threw the corpse onto the ground. The muffled sound of the corpse smashing onto the ground resounded in the surroundings, causing many people to involuntarily swallow a mouthful of saliva. Who exactly was this young man? He actually dared to kill a prince of the imperial family, Huangfu Wu, in front of everyone. This was completely looking down on the imperial family and Emperor Qing. Let's go. After killing Huangfu Wu, Zhuowen leaped onto the stage and pulled Miao Lv's right hand. With a stomp of his foot, the two of them disappeared from the Drunken Spring Pavilion. The instant the two of them left, the Drunken Spring Pavilion was instantly thrown into chaos. The prince of the imperial family, Huangfu Wu, had actually been killed within the pavilion. This news instantly spread like wildfire throughout the entire imperial capital, spreading like wildfire. Chapter 1155. Heavenly Emperor Wu was killed by a mysterious young man. Deep in the throne room, Emperor Qing muttered to himself as he looked at the guard who was kneeling on one knee in front of him. There was no emotion in his eyes and he appeared extremely calm. Your Highness Emperor Qing, this young man is extremely arrogant. He actually dares to look down on our imperial family. What should we do? The guard asked softly as he knelt on the ground. Emperor Qing waved his hand and said indifferently, "You may leave first. I will deal with this matter." The guard nodded when he heard this. He bowed and slowly withdrew from the large hall. Emperor Qing's eyes were cold as he stood quietly in the hall. He muttered to himself, "Do you really think that I don't know who you are? The mysterious young man who killed our imperial family's prince, Zhuowen, the moment he arrived. This young man should be Zhuowen. This young man has a high-grade emperor weapon, Bloodblade. I'm afraid that he will be difficult to deal with." A trace of fear flashed in the Qing Supreme Emperor's eyes. He still remembered the scene when he, Supreme Jin, Supreme Lan, and Supreme Feng had besieged Zhuowen at the Unfettered Sect. At that time, Zhuowen had used a trace of divine sense left in the slaughtering oath-breaking blade to kill Supreme Jin and Supreme Lan in one fell swoop. If he, the Qing Supreme Emperor, had not noticed that something was amiss, he would not have been spared either. Fortunately, I have already made preparations. Even if this young man is fully prepared and comes for revenge, I will make sure that he does not return. A dense and cold voice gradually resounded throughout the entire great hall. Soon after, it was drowned out by the darkness. In a rather remote alley in the imperial capital, Two figures fell into the alley like black lightning. These two figures were a man and a woman. The man wore a long black robe and had a chiseled face. Although he couldn't be said to be handsome, he was quite pleasing to the eye. The woman was about 17 or 18 years old. She was dressed in an emerald green robe and her pure white collarbone was slightly exposed. Her youthful face was flushed and she looked extremely beautiful. These two people were Zhuowen and Miao LV. After Zhuowen took Miao LV away, he came to this quiet alley. The news of him killing Huangfu Wook had already spread throughout the imperial city. At this moment, the imperial city had already sent out teams of soldiers to conduct a carpet search in the vast imperial city to find the real murderer, Zhuowen. Miao LV stole a glance at Zhuowen before her. Her hands were clasped as she fell into silence. Or rather, she was so nervous that she did not know what to say. Zhuowen smiled when he saw Miao LV's way. He said gently, LV, 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 I did not expect that you would still remember the formation after 2 years. LV, LV of course, brother Zhuo, brother. You're exaggerating. Back then, the lousy formation you created was indeed good. It was precisely because of this song of yours that Luo decided to work hard to learn music and dance. It was all for the sake of today, to recreate this impassioned song on the stage you stood on back then. Also, brother Zhuo, did you return to the Qing Xian Empire to look for the Qing Emperor? Miao LV stole a glance at Zhuowen as she spoke. She was very careful. The battle between Zhuowen and the Qing Emperor had spread throughout the Qing Xian Empire. She knew that if Zhuowen returned to the Qing Xian Empire, his only goal would be revenge. Yes. There are some things that I should settle with the Qing Emperor. Zhuowen said non-committally. Brother Zhuo, the Qing Emperor is too strong. You have not reached the Emperor realm yet. Are you his match? Miao LV frowned as she asked worriedly. Zhuowen smiled light-heartedly and said, Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Oh right, Elvia, I have something to ask you. Do you have any news about Brother Hantian and Elder Shiyuan? Miao LV was stunned. She looked around and said, Brother Zhuo, you have found the right person. I should be one of the people who know about Elder Hantian and Elder Shiyuan. Oh, you have news about them? Zhuowen's eyes lit up as he asked quickly. Yes. Brother Zhuo, in the 2 years that you left, the structure of the Qing Xian Empire has changed a lot. In the Qing Xian Empire, many commanderies have rebelled. Among them, Muqin Commandery has started a tug-of-war with the imperial capital. These rebellious commanderies have called themselves the Celestial Empire, and the leader of the Celestial Empire is called the Heavenly Emperor. The Celestial Empire and the imperial capital have been fighting for almost 2 years. However, the imperial capital's forces are too strong. Although the Celestial Empire's forces are not small, they are unable to take down the imperial capital. The two forces have been in a stalemate. Miao LV looked at Zhuowen with a smile. She had already made it so obvious. Zhuowen should know about the Celestial Empire and the identity of the Heavenly Emperor. Could it be that the Celestial Empire was established by Brother Hantian? Zhuowen suddenly realized. Yes. The Celestial Empire was established by Elder Hantian and Elder Shiyuan. When Elder Hantian and Elder Shiyuan escaped from the imperial capital, they were wanted by the Qing Emperor. In the first year, the two of them had been hiding everywhere. It was extremely embarrassing. However, in the second year, Elder Hantian's cultivation broke through to the Second Heaven Emperor realm and he rose to power. He killed all the people from the imperial capital who were chasing after them. Then, with Muqin Commandery as his base, he gathered the other commanderies and started to rebel. He wanted to overthrow the Qing Emperor's rule. Miao LV nodded and smiled. Brother Hantian has broken through. Hearing this, Zhuowen also smiled. Zhuowen naturally knew about Lu Hantian's talent. Back then, the latter's talent was second to none in the entire Qing Xian Empire. It was just that he had been stuck at the peak of the Heavenly Master realm for many years. However, after accumulating and breaking through to the Emperor realm, Lu Hantian's talent was finally revealed. His cultivation speed in the Emperor realm was much faster than ordinary Emperor realm experts. In just a year, He had broken through to the Second Heaven Emperor realm. Moreover, it was in a place like the Qing Xian Empire where the origin qi was not very abundant. This kind of speed was definitely monstrous. Elvia, can you take me to where Brother Hantian is? Zhuowen looked at Miao Lv with a smile. He knew that since the latter was so clear, she was probably from the Celestial Empire. Although he did not know why Elvia was still in the imperial capital, she should have other motives. Brother Zhuo, there is a secret passage in the imperial capital that leads to the outside of the imperial capital. Once we walk out of the passage, there will be people from the Celestial Empire waiting for us. Just follow me later, Miao Lv said softly. Hearing this, Zhuo Wen nodded his head. At the same time, he used his communication jade talisman to summon Ziyang and the other four back. After which, he followed behind Miao Lu and planned to leave the imperial city. According to Miao Lv, the secret passage existed in her room in the Drunken Spring Pavilion. The group of 7 silently arrived at the Drunken Spring Pavilion once again. At this moment, the Drunken Spring Pavilion was already heavily guarded. After Huangfu Wuk was killed, the royal family was furious. They had sent a large number of soldiers to seal off the Drunken Spring Pavilion's vast territory. With the cultivation of Zhuowen, Ziyang and the others, there was no problem sneaking into the Drunken Spring Pavilion in front of these ordinary soldiers. As a result, the group of 7 smoothly entered Miao Lv's room. Bringing so many men into her room all of a sudden, Miao Lv felt a little embarrassed. Her face was flushed red, but she also knew that this was a serious matter. Although she was shy, she still acted in a natural manner. Miao Lv's room was rather elegant. The room was filled with the refreshing fragrance of sandalwood. Miao Lv came to the bedside and groped around the pillow. The sound of grinding gears rang out, and a cave that was just big enough to accommodate one person appeared in the middle of the bed. Within the cave was a dark tunnel. This tunnel should be the secret passage that Miao Lv mentioned that led to the outside world. Follow me, Miao Lv said softly, and took the lead to enter the tunnel. Zhuowen followed closely behind without any hesitation. Ziyang and the other 4 also followed behind one after another, entering the tunnel. After the 7 of them entered the tunnel that was originally open closed once again, returning to its original state. After entering the tunnel, Miao Lv took out a match and brought a dim yellow light to the pitch-black tunnel. The tunnel was rather deep. The group silently walked for over an hour before finally exiting the tunnel. Outside the exit was a dense forest. Dozens of miles ahead of the forest was the behemoth-like imperial capital. Zhuowen and the others knew that they had already left the imperial capital. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Suddenly, 3 black figures swept over from above the tunnel. After circling a few times in the air, they landed in front of Zhuowen, Miao Lv, and the others. Taking a closer look, Zhuowen discovered that the 3 black figures were actually birds made of bronze. The surface of the bronze birds flashed with the light of runes. Clearly, they were transportation tools made by some arcana master. 3 figures walked down from the 3 bronze birds. 2 men and 1 woman. One of them was over 50 years old. His hair was slightly white, and there was a trace of intimidating light in his eyes. The remaining man and woman were not very old. They should be around 20 years old. The 3 of them came in front of Miao Lv. First, they smiled at Miao Lv, and then their gazes landed on Zhuowen and the others. Elvia. These 6 are. The middle-aged man pointed at Zhuowen and the others, and said with some confusion. The 3 of them had actually received Miao Lv's signal and hurried over to pick up Miao Lv, but they didn't expect that Miao Lv would bring along 6 strangers they didn't know. Hee. Uncle Liu, the 6 of them are on our side. You will know when we return to the Celestial Empire. Miao Lv did not immediately reveal Zhuowen's identity. Instead, she pretended to be mysterious. The middle-aged man called Uncle Liu raised his eyebrows and shook his head with a smile. Girl, you still like to keep people in suspense. But since you think there's no problem, then there shouldn't be a problem. Come on, let's return to the Celestial Empire together. As he spoke, Uncle Liu leaped onto the bronze bird and called out to Miao Lv, Zhuowen, and the others. Big Brother Zhuo, Let's get on Uncle Liu's bronze bird. Meow LV smiled sweetly at Zhuowen. Her jade-like hand held onto Zhuowen's right hand, and she enthusiastically pulled him onto Uncle Liu's bronze bird. Chapter 1156. An old friend Lu who is this? After Miao Lu pulled Zhuowen onto Uncle Liu's bronze bird, the young man standing on the other bronze bird asked with a tinge of jealousy. Looking at the jealous young man, Miao Lu frowned slightly and said indifferently, "Fang Yu, this has nothing to do with you, right?" The young man called Fang Yu narrowed his eyes and a cold light gushed out. This cold light was not directed at Miao Lu but Zhuowen. "Kid. Miao Lu is the princess of our celestial empire. Don't be a toad lusting after a swan's meat. If you know what's good for you, you'd better stay away from her." A vicious voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen to frown slightly. His gaze landed on Fang Yu indifferently. However, he only glanced at him and did not pay too much attention to him. Fang Yu's cultivation was not very high. He was about 25 years old in the Xuanzuan realm. In the Qingxian Empire, those who could reach such a cultivation at such a young age could be crowned as geniuses. Moreover, from the trace of arrogance in Fang Yu's eyes, Zhuowen could guess that Fang Yu's status in the Celestial Empire was not low. However, he did not care at all. It could even be said that he did not place Fang Yu in his eyes. The current Zhuowen already had the strength to kill a second-level martial emperor. Cultivators below the martial emperor realm were indeed not worthy of his attention. Fang Yu also sensed the trace of indifference in Zhuowen's eyes. The coldness in his eyes became even more intense. However, he did not make a move. This was the territory of the imperial capital. If they were discovered here, the consequences would be unimaginable. Uncle Liu's eyes flashed. He naturally saw through Fang Yu's strange behavior. However, he shook his head. How could he not see through Miao Lu's thoughts? He did not have any feelings for Fang Yu. Fang Yu's pursuit of Miao Lu would only end in failure. However, Uncle Liu was surprised that Miao Lu was so passionate towards this unfamiliar young man. He could even see that Miao Lu's expression towards Zhuowen carried a trace of shyness. This young man. I can't see through him. Uncle Liu carefully sized up Zhuowen. Only then did he discover that even with his current cultivation, he still couldn't see through this young man who was only in his 20s. He couldn't even see through the 5 people that the young man had brought with him. Uncle Liu couldn't help but be shocked by this discovery. Could it be that they are all above the Golden Exalt realm? Uncle Liu could not help but exclaim in his heart. He knew that there were only 2 situations where he could not see through them. The first was that their cultivation was higher than his, and the second was that they were hiding their cultivation. However, seeing that Zhuowen's group did not deliberately hide their auras, it was obvious that they were in the former situation. These people aren't simple. When did Miao LV find them? Uncle Liu took a deep look at Zhuowen's group. Soon after, he blew a loud and clear whistle. Immediately, the bronze bird below his feet let out a cry, spread its wings and soared into the sky. In an instant, it had reached a height of over 10,000 miles. Whoosh! Above the clouds, Zhuowen stood quietly on the back of the bird. The whistling wind blew his messy hair and made it dance in the air. This should be the work of Elder Shiyuan, right? Zhuowen asked Miao LV, who was beside him, with a smile. Miao LV smiled and said, "It is indeed the work of Elder Shiyuan. It is precisely because of Elder Shiyuan that the Celestial Empire's military strength is much weaker than the imperial capital's. However, with the origin formation refined by Elder Shiyuan, the Celestial Empire has the upper hand in every battle. For the past year, the imperial capital has been unable to do anything to the Celestial Empire." Zhuowen nodded. As an arcanist, he was very clear about the powerful role of an arcanist in a war. If a powerful origin formation was placed on the battlefield, it could easily kill many weak soldiers. No matter how many soldiers there were, they would not be spared. Zhuowen and Miao LV's conversation did not lower their voices. Uncle Liu, who was standing in front of the bronze bird, naturally heard the conversation between the two. Especially when he heard Zhuowen mention Elder Shiyuan, Uncle Liu was even more certain that this person's identity was definitely not the same. Elder Xuan's status in the Celestial Empire was equivalent to the heavenly Emperor Lu Hantian. He was an extremely revered figure by countless warriors in the Celestial Empire. Looking at Zhuowen's tone, it was as if he was talking about a good friend. Uncle Liu was surprised and doubtful. The speed of the bronze bird was very fast. It was even much faster than Zhuowen, who had 3 pairs of thunder wings. However, the distance between Muqin County and the imperial capital was not short. At this speed, it would probably take 2 or 3 days. Therefore, Zhuowen was not in a hurry. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the back of the bird. Occasionally, he would talk to Miao LV, but most of the time, he was immersed in cultivating the river diagram formation. It was worth noting that Fang Yu, who was on the other bronze bird, would occasionally cast his gaze in Zhuowen's direction. Especially when he saw Miao LV frequently talking to Zhuowen enthusiastically, his expression became colder and colder each time. 2 days later, the bronze bird finally arrived at the capital of Muqin County. Looking down at the unfamiliar yet familiar city from thousands of miles above, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of emotion. Back then, his martial path had begun here. It was also here that he had met Lu Hantian, an extremely important brother to him. Revisiting an old place always gave Zhuowen a trace of excitement. The security of the provincial capital was unexpectedly tight. Numerous soldiers wearing heavy armor continuously patrolled the tall city walls. The sound of orderly footsteps continuously resounded in one's ears. That's Lord Liu and the others, as well as Princess Miao LV, have also returned. The soldiers on the city wall immediately noticed the 3 descending bronze birds. Their eyes were filled with respect. The news of Princess Miao LV's return had already spread throughout the county when Uncle Liu and the other 2 went to welcome her. As the princess of the Celestial Empire, Miao LV was both talented and beautiful. Her temperament was unparalleled, and her reputation in the Celestial Empire was quite high. Furthermore, Miao LV was only 17 or 18 years old, the most beautiful period of a woman's life. It could be said that she had countless suitors in the Celestial Empire. After descending from the sky, Miao LV pulled Zhuowen and headed straight for the house of Marquis Qin. Xiang and the other 4 silently followed behind Zhuowen. Humph! Seeing this scene, Fang Yu coldly snorted, his eyes filled with coldness. Uncle Liu also noticed the displeasure in Fang Yu's eyes. He shook his head and said, "Fang Yu, the young man that Miao LV brought back is not simple. I advise you not to provoke him. Otherwise, the consequences will not be good." Hearing Uncle Liu's advice, Fang Yu's pupils shrank. The coldness in his eyes grew even more intense as he said, "Uncle Liu, I think you're worrying too much." As he spoke, Fang Yu followed closely behind Miao LV. Uncle Liu's brows slightly knitted as he shook his head and sighed. How could he not know what Fang Yu was thinking? However, he could not care too much about the matters of young people. "Princess." When they arrived at the entrance of the mansion, the 2 guards respectfully greeted Miao LV. Soon after, the group entered the mansion without any obstructions. Big Brother Zhuo, Elder Lu and Elder Shiyuan are currently cultivating in the Yuanqi Tower. You should wait in the guest hall for a while. I will inform the 2 of them. They will come out from the Yuanqi Tower when the time comes. In the hall, after Zhuowen, Xiang and the other 4 sat on chairs, Miao LV instructed Zhuowen before walking towards the Yuanqi Tower. "Master, Muqin County is somewhat extraordinary. If I'm not wrong, the Yuanqi Tower should be an emperor weapon. It has been sealed in Muqin County and even Emperor Qing did not discover it. I'm afraid that it has already been successfully refined by Lu Hantian." Xiang's eyes flickered as he glanced at the Yuanqi Tower and whispered to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded. In fact, as his cultivation continued to increase, he increasingly felt that the Yuanqi Tower was extraordinary. It could actually contain a miniature world. This could only be done by an emperor weapon. However, Zhuowen's cultivation was too low and he had never discovered it. Big Brother Hantian should have discovered the secret of the Yuanqi Tower long ago. He was waiting for the moment he reached the Emperor realm to completely refine the Yuan Qi Tower into his natal Emperor weapon. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. After Miao Lu left, Fang Yu slowly walked in. Beside Fang Yu, there were two youths of similar age. The two youths looked very similar, and they should be close blood brothers. Seeing the two brothers beside Fang Yu, Zhuowen's mouth curved into a smile. These two brothers were no strangers to him. They were the second prince of the house of Marquis Qin, LV Yongsheng, and the third prince of the house of Marquis Qin, Lu Yuanhua. They had conflicts with Zhuowen and were taught a lesson by him. Brother Fang Yu, there's actually someone who dares to deceive our princess Miao LV. Is this person tired of living? LV Yuanhua purposely shouted loudly the moment he entered the guest hall. His voice was filled with piercing intent. LV Yongsheng's gaze was cold and gloomy as his attention landed on Zhuowen and the other five seated in the hall. Haha. Brother Yongsheng, Brother Yuanhua, I won't lie to you about this matter. I don't know what method this brat used to make Princess Miao LV take the initiative to hold his hand. Apart from deceit, I really can't think of any other method to make the princess go to such an extent. Furthermore, this person's purpose in coming here isn't pure. I suspect that this person is very likely a spy from the imperial capital. Fang Yu smiled faintly. His voice was a little loud, but after he finished speaking, he found that the atmosphere was a little strange. This was because he found that LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua, who were originally standing beside him with an overbearing aura, were silent at the same time. When his gaze fell on LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua, he found that the two of them were staring straight at Zhuowen. Their gazes were filled with fear, as if they had seen a ghost. Just when Fang Yu was curious about the two's reaction, Zhuowen slowly stood up and said to LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua with a smile, Brother Yongsheng, Brother Yuanhua, it's been a few years since we last met. How have you been? You know each other? Hearing Zhuowen's greeting, Fang Yu was startled. Soon after, he asked LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua in surprise. LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua didn't pay attention to Fang Yu at all. Recalling the rumors about Zhuowen, the two brothers immediately had a warm smile on their faces. They went up to him, nodded and bowed, and said with a smile, So it's Brother Zhuo. Why didn't you tell us that you were coming back? Chapter 1157. Goodbye, Lu Hantian. This. Seeing that LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua were actually showing a warm expression towards Zhuowen, Fang Yu finally realized that something was wrong. She asked the two of them, What's going on with the two of you? Seeing Fang Yu continue to ask, LV Yongsheng replied somewhat strangely, Brother Fang, this is Zhuowen, the one who killed the 5 great Empyreans of the Qing Xian royal family and fought with the Qing emperor. After answering Fang Yu's question, the two brothers no longer paid attention to the slightly stunned Fang Yu. Zhuowen was different from the past. 2 years ago, he already had the strength to kill an Empyrean. Today, 2 years later, he was probably even stronger. He was a peerless monster that they could not afford to offend. The two brothers even blamed Fang Yu for instigating them to deal with Zhuowen. Facing the warm greetings of the two brothers, LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua, Zhuowen responded to them one by one with a smile. Right now, the height that Zhuowen stood at was already beyond the reach of the two of them, so Zhuowen did not take some of the past grudges to heart. Brother Zhuo, where is my big brother now? After chatting for a while, LV Yongsheng asked with an embarrassed smile. Don't worry, the place where Brother LV is at is very safe. Zhuowen did not answer directly, but instead gave an ambiguous answer. LV Itao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian had been brought into the Azure Dragon Hall by him long ago. With the environment of the Azure Dragon Hall and their talent, their cultivation would definitely soar by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, the Zhuo family was also in the Azure Dragon Hall. In fact, what Zhuowen was looking forward to was that among the members of the Zhuo family, there would be someone who, under the catalysis of the Azure Dragon's origin, would give birth to a powerful existence like the Dragon Soul. Even if it was a low-quality Dragon Soul, it would still be much stronger than an ordinary Armor Soul. After the matters of the Qing Xian Empire are settled, it's time to break into the Azure Dragon Hall again. Zhuowen whispered in his heart. The Azure Dragon Hall had the inheritance of a saint, and the entire Azure Dragon Hall was a sacred artifact. If Zhuowen could completely control the Azure Dragon Hall, then he would undoubtedly have endless resources, and Zhuowen could also rely on the Azure Dragon Hall to develop his own power. However, Zhuowen also knew that since the Azure Dragon Hall was a saint artifact, it would not be easy to completely control the former. However, one had to walk the path step by step. Controlling the Azure Dragon Hall could not be rushed. Seeing that Zhuowen's answer was somewhat ambiguous, LV Yongsheng and LV Yuanhua looked at each other. They both knew that Zhuowen didn't want to reveal LV Yitao's location. Although the two brothers were somewhat worried about LV Yitao, since Zhuowen refused to say, they couldn't do anything about it. As for LV Yitao's safety, the two of them were not worried. Zhuowen and LV Yitao's relationship was quite good. Zhuowen should not go so far as to harm the latter. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 3 figures landed in the courtyard outside the reception hall. An unparalleled aura swept out, causing the atmosphere in the reception hall to stagnate. Sky Emperor, Master Shi Yuan, LV Yongsheng, LV Yuanhua, and Fang Yu all turned around when they felt the fierce aura. When they saw the 3 figures that had suddenly appeared in the courtyard, they were stunned at first, but soon after, they clasped their hands together and greeted respectfully. Zhuowen slowly raised his head. His eyes focused on the disheveled and slightly sloppy figure in front of him, as well as the old man in a long black robe beside him. A rare look of excitement appeared in his eyes. LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan ignored Fang Yu and the other two. Their eyes were also fixed on Zhuowen. After looking at each other for about 5 breaths, LV Hantian suddenly laughed out loud. He stepped into the reception hall and came before Zhuowen. He sized up Zhuowen and placed his hands on Zhuowen's shoulders excitedly. Good boy. After not seeing you for 2 years, you have grown a lot stronger. Your face is also much more handsome than before. Of course, don't be too proud. Compared to your big brother, your looks are still lacking. Hearing LV Hantian's narcissistic words, Zhuowen rolled his eyes, but he felt a warm current in his heart. The excitement in LV Hantian's eyes was from the bottom of his heart, and it was not fake. The former was sincerely happy to see him. Zhuowen, it's good that you are back. It's good that you are back. Elder Shi Yuan was also excited. However, he was obviously at a loss for words. In the end, he could only squeeze out such a sentence. Seeing that the 2 highest-ranking commanders of the Celestial Empire actually showed such enthusiasm towards Zhuowen, Fang Yu was completely silent. There was a trace of lingering fear in his eyes. Fortunately, he did not directly find trouble with Zhuowen. Otherwise, his fate would be unimaginable. Big brother, Elder Shi Yuan, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. It was difficult to hide the excitement in his tone. Zhuowen, after not seeing you for 2 years, your progress is really great. You have actually reached the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm. After the excitement, LV Hantian also felt the vast aura in Zhuowen's body at this moment and could not help but be surprised. LV Yongsheng and the other 2 on the side could not help but tremble violently when they heard this. They looked at Zhuowen with a trace of admiration in their eyes. Zhuowen was only about 22 years old, but his cultivation had already reached the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm. This kind of cultivation speed was really something that they could not catch up to. Zhuowen nodded, tacitly agreeing with LV Hantian's words. A first-level Emperor Realm Warrior, 4 peak Heavenly Master Realm Warriors. Zhuowen, these 5 are your companions. At the same time, LV Hantian discovered that Xiang and the other 4 had the same terrifying aura. In particular, Xiang's body faintly revealed an Emperor's aura. This was a genuine Emperor Realm Warrior. The 5 of us are not Master's companions, but Master's servants. Xiang quickly corrected him. Servants. After Xiang's explanation, the atmosphere in the entire reception hall was slightly stagnant. Not only LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan, but even Fang Yu and the other 2, as well as Miao Lu, who was standing behind, were all stunned. This must be a joke. 1 Emperor Realm Warrior, 4 peak Heavenly Master experts. This was an extremely terrifying force. However, they were merely Zhuowen's servants. How did Zhuowen subdue 5 such powerful warriors? Zhuowen shook his head and transmitted a message to LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan, explaining the identities of Xiang and the other 4. Immediately, LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan looked at Xiang and the other 4 with strange gazes. Now, Xiang and the other 4 had completely changed their appearances due to the reconstruction of their physical bodies. Even if Emperor Qing were to come in person, he would not be able to recognize that the 5 of them were once his subordinates. The 3 of you can leave first. I still have some matters to discuss with Zhuowen. LV Hantian suddenly instructed Fang Yu and the other 2. The 3 of them did not dare to refute. They bowed and slowly left the reception hall. Miao Lu, on the other hand, stayed in the hall at Zhuowen's request. Zhuowen, tell me about your experiences in the past 2 years. When we heard that you had entered the space-time turbulence, we all thought that you might die. LV Hantian asked impatiently as soon as he sat down. Zhuowen nodded and immediately recounted everything that had happened in the past 2 years. From the Yangxian Empire to the desolate ancient city, then joining the Jioshan Academy, and some of the things that had happened in the Sea of Bitterness. Hearing Zhuowen's narration, LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan revealed a strange expression. Miao Lu looked at Zhuowen with a faint trace of pity in her eyes. Although Zhuowen's tone was extremely calm and his narration was very simple, she could still infer how difficult Zhuowen's days were from those words. After listening to Zhuowen's narration, LV Hantian and Elder Shi Yuan could not help but sigh. They could not imagine how Zhuowen had managed to walk down that path. His willpower was indeed worthy of their admiration. Zhuowen, from what you said, you should have met Master Mu Feng after joining the Inner Academy, right? Have you also obtained the 1000-fold fossil? Elder Shi Yuan's eyes lit up as he asked Zhuowen. I have indeed obtained the 1000-fold fossil. This time, I came back to ask Elder Shi Yuan how to completely merge the 9 types of earth fire into the heavenly fire. Moreover, I only have 8 types of earth fire and am still missing one. I wonder if Elder Shi Yuan has any other earth fire? Zhuowen asked somewhat urgently. Elder Shi Yuan sighed and said, the younger generation will surpass us in time. I did not expect Master Mu Feng to be so easy to talk to. He actually told you about the 1000-fold fossil so easily. Back then, when I asked him about it, he directly threw me out. The corner of Elder Shuan's mouth twitched as he thought of the unbearable past. He did not continue speaking but looked at Zhuowen with bright eyes and said, back then, I also found 9 types of earth fire. However, I failed to merge them. The failed flame has been suppressed and sealed by me. As for the earth fire, I still have 1 type. However, Zhuowen, after you merge the heavenly fire, can you give me the remaining 1000-fold fossil? At that moment, Elder Shi Yuan looked at Zhuowen with some hope in his eyes. Zhuowen knew that Elder Shi Yuan should be planning to use the remaining 1000-fold fossil to merge the failed flame again, hoping to merge it into the heavenly fire. If Elder Shi Yuan can help me merge the heavenly fire successfully, why not give the remaining 1000-fold fossil to Elder Shi Yuan? Zhuowen smiled. The 1000-fold fossil was only useful to him in forming the heavenly fire. If he could merge the heavenly fire and there was still some left, Zhuowen naturally did not mind giving it to Elder Shi Yuan. After receiving Zhuowen's promise, Elder Shuan's eyes were filled with excitement and he looked at Zhuowen with even more gratitude. After chatting for a while, Zhuowen suddenly said seriously, Brother Lu, I think you should know the purpose of my return, right? Upon hearing that, Lu Hantian's face became serious and he said, are you going to settle the score with Emperor Qing? Yes. Zhuowen nodded. Chapter 1158. By Furong how many forces? Zhuowen frowned slightly. If what Lu Hantian said was true, then Emperor Qing really needed to be on guard. After all, Emperor Qing was another outer elder of the Azure Dragon main hall, which made Zhuowen quite wary of him. Do you know which forces they are? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Lu Hantian shook his head and said, those forces are extremely secretive. We haven't been able to find any details about them. I think it won't be long before Emperor Qing launches a general attack on our celestial empire. He won't let the Celestial Empire continue to develop. It seems that we don't have much time. During this time, I will prepare to integrate the heavenly fire with Elder Shiyuan and set up the necessary 6th grade origin formation. I hope that we can completely set up the origin formation needed for this war before Emperor Qing takes action, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. 6th grade origin formation? Zhuowen, your mind power has also reached 6th grade origin formation? Lu Hantian and Elder Shiyuan stared at Zhuowen and asked in unison. They stared at Zhuowen. Zhuowen did not expect their reactions to be so big. He scratched his head and said, I was lucky to have a breakthrough in the outer court of Jioshan College. Seeing Zhuowen's appearance, the two were speechless. This boy was really unpredictable. There were only a few people in the Eastern Land who could reach 6th grade origin formation at such a young age. What was even more incredible was that this boy's martial arts had also reached the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. Both origin power and mind power could reach such a terrifying level. It had to be said that Zhuowen was a freak. Good, good. Zhuowen, you are also a 6th grade Arcana Master. You will be of great help to me this time. Maybe the Celestial Empire will really be on our side in this war. Elder Shuan's face was flushed. He looked at Zhuowen excitedly and praised him. Let's go. Let's enter the Origin Formation Tower first. The Origin Formation Tower is much richer than the outside world. It is also very spacious. It is just right for the two of you to study the Origin Formation Tower and integrate the heavenly fire. Lu Hantian laughed and waved his sleeve, leading Zhuowen, Elder Shiyuan, Miao, Xiang, and the others, toward the Origin Formation Tower. This Origin Formation Tower is tower. Is tower. Is tower is tower is there, it, is tower a tower is tower is tower is tower is tower is tower? When they approached the Origin Formation Tower, Xiao Hei's surprised voice sounded. Zhuowen nodded. He had more experience than Lu Hantian. The Emperor's aura emitted by the Origin Formation Tower was indeed very powerful. It should be around a mid-grade Emperor artifact, and its aura was even stronger than Azura's Jade Fate Bow. The Origin Formation Tower had been refined by Lu Hantian into a Life Emperor artifact. Therefore, he only needed to use his mind to easily bring Zhuowen and the others into the Origin Formation Tower. This is the 4th floor of the Origin Formation Tower. Looking at the barren land that stretched as far as the eye could see, as well as the scattered ruins in the distance, Zhuowen recognized at a glance that this was the 4th floor of the Yuan-Chi Tower. Those ruins were the ruins of sects that had been established on the 4th floor of the Yuan-Chi Tower in ancient times. Arriving at the ruins, Lu Hantian led the group to a brand new ring-shaped building. There were many pavilions in this building. Zhuowen knew that this building should be Lu Hantian's residence. Fortunately, this building occupied a large area. It was no problem for nearly 100 people to stay here. Therefore, it was more than enough for Zhuowen and his group to stay here. Moreover, the Yuan Qi on the 4th floor of the Essence Qi Tower was extremely dense. It was indeed a good place for seclusion. After settling Zhuowen and the others, Lu Hantian called out Zhuowen and Elder Shiyuan. Immediately, he said in a serious tone, the two of you need to fuse with the heavenly fire. I have chosen a sealed room for you. When the time comes, I will stand guard outside. If there are any unexpected situations, immediately summon me. Zhuowen and Elder Shiyuan both nodded. Immediately, Lu Hantian led the two to the secret room he mentioned. The secret room was extremely spacious and the surroundings were made of hard granite. Even the door leading to the outside world was an extremely thick stone door. It could be seen that this secret room was extremely suitable for fusing with the heavenly fire. After all, the heavenly fire was a mysterious item and its destructive power was extremely terrifying. If the defensive measures were not taken well, it would be easy to set oneself on fire. The two of you be careful. I will stand guard outside. Remember, if there are any changes, you must inform me. Lu Hantian gave a few more instructions and left the stone door. The heavenly fire was a mysterious item and it was much more terrifying than the earth fire. It was no wonder that Lu Hantian was so cautious. After the stone door closed, Elder Shiyuan solemnly asked Zhuowen, "Zhuowen, are you ready?" "Of course." Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. "Take out all the earth fire in your body," Elder Shiyuan said without batting an eyelid. Boom, boom, boom. Zhuowen nodded slightly and stomped his feet. Suddenly, a colorful earth fire burst out from his body. In an instant, the temperature of the stone room rose to an extremely terrifying level. 3,000 green lotus flame, 9 heaven thunder inferno flame, star flame, crimson flame, 9 nether cold flame, purple cloud from the east, sunfire, and golden phoenix flame. 8 types of earth fire with extremely terrifying temperatures surrounded Zhuowen's body. The surging flames shone on Zhuowen's face, making him look even more sacred. Elder Shiyuan looked at the 8 types of earth fire surrounding Zhuowen and his eyes were filled with astonishment. Especially the sunfire and golden phoenix flame. The power of these 2 types of flames vaguely surpassed that of the earth fire. However, there was still a large gap between them and the heavenly fire. Other than these 2 types of flames, the other 6 types of earth fire were not weak either. At least, they were of a much higher quality than the 9 types of earth fire that Elder Shiyuan had used previously. Zhuowen, the 8 types of earth fire in your body are of a very high quality. If the fusion fails, the flames that will be produced will be even more terrifying than the flames that I used previously. You have to be mentally prepared, Elder Shiyuan said cautiously. When Zhuowen heard what Elder Shiyuan had said, his eyes became extremely solemn. Even Elder Shiyuan was being so cautious, he had to take this seriously. After taking a deep breath, Zhuowen flicked his right finger and took out the blood crystal source, which was the 1000-fold fossil. He said in a deep voice, "Elder, let's begin." Elder Shiyuan nodded and said, "Use the flame fusion art to fuse the 8 types of earth fire together." When Zhuowen heard what Elder Shiyuan had said, he did not hesitate. A huge amount of mental strength gushed out from his Niwen palace. He then used the flame fusion art. The invisible mental strength was like a huge hand, grabbing the 8 types of earth fire and slowly approaching them. At the same time, a strange hissing sound was heard during the fusion of the earth fire. From time to time, there were colorful sparks. "Fuse," Zhuowen said indifferently. Soon after, the 8 types of earth flames abruptly merged together. In an instant, the flickering flames of 8 different colors slowly merged into one. In the end, they formed a ball of flames that flickered with 8 different colors. The moment the 8 types of earth fire merged, the temperature in the stone room reached an unprecedented level. Even Zhuowen felt that his entire body was burning. Looking at the 8 types of earth fire that had merged, Elder Shiyuan's eyes narrowed. He reached out his skinny right hand and a white flame flew out from his sleeve. The shape of the flame was like a hibiscus flower. This flame is called Bai Fu Rong. Among the many types of earth fire, it is considered one of the more average types of earth fire. This is the most crucial step. I hope that the fusion of the heavenly fire will succeed. Muttering softly, Elder Shiyuan slowly brought Bai Fu Rong closer to the 8-colored ball of flame. The originally quiet 8-colored ball of flame actually began to go berserk as Bai Fu Rong approached it. The temperature also suddenly increased by a great deal. Zhuowen, activate the power of the 1000-fold fossil. The massacre origin in it can restrain the berserk energy in the flame and achieve the effect of using violence to curb violence. Elder Shiyuan quickly shouted at Zhuowen. Hearing that, Zhuowen also quickly activated the 1000-fold fossil in his hand. Immediately, an extremely berserk massacre aura surged out and turned into blood-colored energy. It slowly enveloped the 8-colored ball of flame and Bai Fu Rong. Boom boom boom. The moment the blood-colored energy enveloped them, the 8-colored ball of flame and Bai Fu Rong finally merged into one. However, this was not the end. The moment they merged into one, Zhuowen clearly sensed that there were continuous explosions coming from the blood-colored energy. It was as if a terrifying chain of explosions had occurred in the blood-colored energy. Elder Shiyuan. Now, Zhuowen looked at Elder Shiyuan and asked. Elder Shiyuan narrowed his eyes and said excitedly, "Pay attention to controlling the energy output of the 1000-fold fossil. If there are no accidents, in 3 days, we might be able to merge into the true heavenly fire." Hearing Elder Shiyuan say this, Zhuowen nodded in agreement. He silently controlled the energy output of the thousandfold fossil, but his gaze was fixed on the ball of blood-colored energy in the sky. Time passed slowly. For 3 days, Zhuowen had been staring at the changes in the ball of blood-colored energy. In these 3 days, the thousandfold fossil's size gradually decreased. Clearly, if all the massacre aura in the thousandfold fossil was squandered away, the thousandfold fossil would eventually dissipate. However, after 3 days, the explosions in the blood-colored energy had weakened a lot. It had even disappeared. Did it succeed? Zhuowen whispered excitedly. I think it should have succeeded. However, we still have to be careful. Regardless of whether it succeeds or fails, the power released is extremely terrifying. Elder Shiyuan said solemnly. Then, he unleashed his powerful mental energy and set up a thick mental energy wall in front of him. Zhuowen nodded his head and followed Elder Shuan's example. After setting up layers of defense in front of him, he began to slowly lift the blood-colored energy above him. Boom. Chapter 1159. 9 Flames Karmic Fire Boom. 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 Terrifying shockwaves spread out in all directions. Zhuowen and Elder Shiyuan took a few steps back. The entire stone room shook violently under the terrifying shockwaves. It's so hot. The temperature in the stone room was rapidly rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. Zhuowen even discovered that the granite walls of the stone room were showing signs of melting. What kind of temperature was needed to melt such a solid rock like granite? Is this the heavenly flame? At that moment, Elder Shiyuan retreated to Zhuowen's side. He lifted his head and looked at the sky in the middle of the stone room. There, a 9-colored flame was suspended in mid-air. The high temperature caused Zhuowen and Elder Shiyuan to squint their eyes. Looks like it's a success. Elder Shiyuan and Zhuowen looked at each other and smiled. Zhuowen, you merged with the heavenly flame. Why don't you try to subdue it? Elder Shiyuan smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded. He took a step forward and slowly approached the 9-colored flame. As he got closer to the flame, Zhuowen realized that the temperature was getting more and more terrifying. Zhuowen's skin was almost burnt by the high temperature. What a terrifying temperature! Feeling the high temperature from his skin, Zhuowen's heart trembled. When he was about 10 meters away from the 9-colored flame, Zhuowen's skin was charred, and his blood felt like it had dried up. Nirvana of the Great Sun. Zhuowen knew that if he did not use a body refining technique like the Nirvana of the Great Sun, it would be difficult for him to get close to the 9-colored flame. Golden light covered Zhuowen's entire body, shrouding him in the golden light. Then, 4 heads and 8 arms grew. After using the Nirvana of the Great Sun, Zhuowen's condition improved. He took a step forward and came before the 9-colored flame. The heavenly flame. Zhuowen stretched out an arm and took the 9-colored flame. Excitement flashed in his eyes. He knew that with the heavenly flame, the cold poison in Mu Chenshua's body would no longer be a problem. After all, the 9-colored flame was merged by Zhuowen. In theory, Zhuowen was its master. Hence, the 9-colored flame did not resist Zhuowen's approach. Zhuowen, give the 9-colored flame a name. After all, it is a man-made heavenly flame. It doesn't have a name, Elder Shiyuan, who was standing at the edge of the stone room, said to Zhuowen with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. His eyes flickered as he said in a low voice, this heavenly flame is formed from the fusion of 9 earthly flames. Let's name it the 9 Flames Karmic Flame. 9 Fire. That's a good name. Let's call it the 9 Flames Karmic Fire then. Elder Shiyuan nodded and smiled. While Zhuowen was immersed in the joy of obtaining the heavenly flame, Xiao Hei's voice was suddenly transmitted. Kid, didn't you feel that when you approached the heavenly flame, the nirvana of the great sun in your body was frantically operating? After hearing Xiao Hei's reminder, Zhuowen noticed that the golden glow on the surface of his body was becoming more and more intense. The Buddhist power in his body was constantly circulating at a jaw-dropping speed. Could it be because of the 9 fire? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he muttered to himself. A body-refining technique like the nirvana of the great sun is meant to be reborn from the flames. The stronger the flame, the more effective it is for the cultivation of the nirvana of the great sun. Kid, you have been stuck at the 4th level of the nirvana of the great sun for a long time. I feel that if you borrow the power of the 9 fire, you should be able to raise the nirvana of the great sun to the 5th level of immortality. Xiao Hei's voice slowly rang in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen's eyes to suddenly brighten. Immediately, Zhuowen turned his head and said to Elder Shiyuan, Elder Shiyuan, I suddenly had an epiphany and plan to go into seclusion here for a period of time. I hope that you will not disturb me. Here are the remaining 1,000-fold fossils. Take them. Elder Shiyuan was stunned. He happily took the 1,000-fold fossils and nodded his head. Since you seem to have an epiphany, I will not disturb you. I will leave first. As he spoke, Elder Shiyuan opened the stone door and left the stone room. When the stone door was closed again, Zhuowen silently sat cross-legged in the stone room. Then, he stared at the 9 fire that was constantly changing color in his palm and muttered softly, I hope that the nirvana of the great sun can really break through to the last step. As he spoke, Zhuowen's thoughts moved and the 9 fire surged out. In an instant, the entire stone room was filled with the 9 fire. Zhuowen sat cross-legged in the sea of fire and Buddhist power surged around him. At the same time, a Buddha eye appeared between his eyebrows and an ancient Buddha shadow appeared above his head. Outside the stone room, Lu Hantian also noticed Elder Shiyuan walking out. He took a step forward and asked Elder Shiyuan, Shiyuan, how is it? Did you succeed? Elder Shiyuan chuckled and said, of course, it was a success. The effect of the 1,000-fold stone was far beyond my imagination. It was so easy to suppress the violent energy of the 9 types of earth fire and successfully merge them together to form the heavenly fire. It actually succeeded. Then, where is Zhuowen? Why isn't he coming out? Lu Hantian was overjoyed at first. Then, he looked at the tightly shut stone door and asked curiously. Zhuowen said that he has comprehended something and intends to go into seclusion for a period of time, Elder Shiyuan said. Hearing that, Lu Hantian nodded. Since Zhuowen intended to go into seclusion, he naturally could not force Zhuowen to come out. In the imperial capital, in the throne room. The Azure Emperor stood silently in the dimly lit main hall. Other than the Azure Emperor, there were 2 groups of people in the main hall. These 2 groups of people each had their own masters and did not seem to be from the same force. Azure Emperor, you said that the murderer of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince, Zhuowen, and the Azure Emperor has returned to the Qing Xian Empire. Where is he now? A middle-aged man with short blue hair and a majestic aura stepped out from the group on the left and looked at the Azure Emperor with a slightly unfriendly gaze. Yun Zhongjuan, you don't have to be so agitated. If I'm not wrong, Zhuowen should be in the Celestial Empire, which is the rebel army led by Lu Hantian and Shiyuan. Because Zhuowen and Lu Hantian are close friends, if he returns to the Qing Xian Empire, he will definitely seek refuge with the Celestial Empire, the Azure Emperor said unhurriedly. The middle-aged man named Yun Zhongjuan snorted and said, Azure Emperor, you wouldn't make up a lie to get us to deal with the rebel army for you, right? The Azure Emperor shook his head and said, I'm not lying about this. I think all of you only need to go to the Excellent Spirit Island to inquire and you'll know that Zhuowen has already left the Excellent Spirit Island. The Emperor's tomb in the Bitter Sea is about to open. There's only one reason for him to leave at this time, and that is to return to the Qing Xian Empire to take revenge on me. What the Azure Emperor said makes sense. Yun Zhongjuan, if you think that the Azure Emperor is lying to you, you can scram back to the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. Don't make a fool of yourself here, the leader of the group on the right said mockingly as he stared at Yun Zhongjuan. This person didn't look old, and his golden hair draped over his shoulders. A unique majestic aura exuded from him, causing the entire throne room to tremble. Sage Jin, your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's Holy Lord didn't come and sent you instead. Obviously, your Holy Lord doesn't attach much importance to this operation. Your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty is more miserable than me. Even your 3rd prince was killed by Zhuowen. It seems like your Holy Lord has a heart of stone, Yun Zhongjuan said with a cold smile. Sage Jin narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, Yun Zhongjuan, Although you're the Holy Lord of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty, you're only a third-level martial emperor like me. What kind of existence is the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's Holy Lord? He's already a mid-level martial emperor. Why would he come to such a small place to deal with a junior? Yun Zhongjuan's eyes were extremely gloomy. The sarcasm in Sage Jin's words was extremely strong, but when he thought of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's Holy Lord, he was speechless. Yun Zhongjuan was only a third-level martial emperor, but the Yaoguang Holy Lord had already reached the fourth-level martial emperor realm. This was why the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was the strongest among the four holy dynasties. Everyone, there's no need to argue. Qing Ji dares to guarantee that Zhuoan must be in the Heavenly Empire. This time, we're joining forces to attack the Heavenly Empire. If Zhuoan isn't in the Heavenly Empire, Qing Ji is willing to apologize with my life. What do you think? Emperor Qing said with a faint smile. Hearing Emperor Qing's solemn promise, Yun Zhongjuan and Sage Jin's expressions froze. Then, they looked deeply at Emperor Qing, who was smiling. Emperor Qing, you're too serious. After all, you're an outer elder of the Azure Dragon Main Palace. Even if Zhuoan isn't in the Heavenly Empire this time, we won't blame you, Sage Jin said with a chuckle. Jin Sheng is right. If it weren't for Elder Qing Ji, we wouldn't even know where Zhuoan was, Yun Zhongjuan said as he shook his head. The anger in his heart had also subsided. Emperor Qing smiled faintly. He didn't take their words to heart. He said with a faint smile, "Now, let's discuss the plan to attack the Heavenly Empire." Lu Hantian and the others were completely unaware of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's participation. At this time, Lu Hantian was still sitting quietly outside the stone door, waiting for Zhuoan to come out of seclusion. He had a feeling that after Zhuoan came out of seclusion, there was a high possibility that there would be a transformation. Senior Hantian, it's been 7 days. Big brother Zhuo hasn't come out yet? Miao Lu, who was dressed in an emerald green dress, slowly walked to the stone door. Her beautiful eyes stared at the stone door as she asked with a little disappointment. A cultivator's seclusion usually takes a long time. It's not that fast. Little girl, I see that you come to see Zhuoan every day. Have you taken a fancy to my brother? If you do, tell me. I'll be your matchmaker. Lu Hantian said casually. Then, he looked at Miao Lu with a slightly mischievous gaze, causing the latter to blush. She stomped her feet and said coquettishly, "Senior Hantian, you're talking nonsense." "I don't think so." "Hey, if you don't think so, why are you blushing?" Lu Hantian said with a smile. "You, humph. I'm ignoring you." Chapter 1160. Buddha's body boom boom boom. The tremors grew more and more intense, as if the entire space was about to collapse. Miao LV barely managed to stabilize her body, a trace of bewilderment in her eyes. Lu Hantian slowly stood up, his eyes flickering as he stared intently at the stone chamber in front of him. He could feel an unprecedented, terrifying aura from there. "Is that Zhuoan?" Lu Hantian muttered. Then, a terrifying golden light pillar shot up into the sky with an aura that could pierce the heavens. Soon after, a 10,000-foot tall Buddha figure slowly appeared from the golden light pillar. A pair of Buddha eyes squinted as it looked down at the barren land below. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The moment the golden light pillar appeared, Xiang and the other four, as well as Elder Shi Yuan, who was still studying the Yuan array, walked out from a nearby building. When they saw the 10,000-foot tall Buddha figure in the sky, their eyes were filled with intense shock. "Those who see my body will have the heart of body. Those who hear my name will break evil and cultivate good. Those who hear my teachings will gain great wisdom. Those who know my heart will become Buddha." The majestic voice was like thunder, a gale, a storm, and a tsunami. It resounded throughout the entire fourth level of the Yuan Qi Tower. The solemn echo filled the entire Yuan Qi Tower. Even the golden light leaked out of the Yuan Qi Tower, and the 10,000-foot tall Buddha figure appeared in the sky above the entire county capital. In the provincial capital, countless cultivators raised their heads to look at the sky. When they saw the majestic Buddha figure, their eyes were filled with shock and awe. Before this Buddha figure, They actually felt a sense of worship from the bottom of their hearts. Bang! The tough stone chamber suddenly exploded, and the crisp sound of footsteps slowly rang out. Amidst the dust, a tall and straight figure slowly walked out. Around this figure, the 9 flames karmic fire was like 1,000 snakes that surrounded his body, transforming into a terrifying sea of fire. Zhuowen. Lu Hantian muttered softly as he looked at the golden figure that was surrounded by countless 9 flames of karma. At this moment, Zhuowen's skin appeared as if it was gilded with gold. However, he no longer had 4 heads and 8 arms. Instead, he had 1 head and 2 arms. However, there was a wheel of light behind his head. That wheel of light shone with Buddhist light and was exceptionally dazzling. The 5th level of the nirvana of the Great Sun was immortality. This level had already reached the realm of returning to one's original state. Moreover, Zhuowen was shocked to discover that when the nirvana of the Great Sun was pushed to the extreme, which was the realm of immortality, the Buddha demon eye automatically switched to the Buddha eye. The Buddha eye used the supreme power of Buddha Tao to condense a Buddha body that was extremely compatible with the power of Buddha Tao. Thud, thud, thud. Another set of footsteps sounded in the dust. The black-robed Zhuowen silently followed behind the Buddhist Zhuowen and appeared in front of Lu Hantian, Miao LV, and the others. These are 2 Zhuowen? Lu Hantian and the others first looked at the black-robed Zhuowen and then at the Zhuowen who was shrouded in Buddhist light. They were all in a daze and their hearts were filled with doubt. Lu Hantian came before the black-robed Zhuowen and the Buddhist Zhuowen and asked with a slight frown, "Which one of you is Zhuowen?" The black-robed Zhuowen and the Buddhist Zhuowen looked at each other and smiled faintly. The black-robed Zhuowen said, "We are both Zhuowen. It's just that we have 2 bodies but we share the same sea of consciousness." Zhuowen, is this the result of the secret technique you cultivated during your seclusion? Whether it was the black-robed Zhuowen or the Buddhist Zhuowen, their auras were both peak heavenly venerables. Lu Hantian even felt a sense of threat from the Buddhist Zhuowen. Obviously, the Buddhist Zhuowen wasn't ordinary. You can understand it that way. The black-robed Zhuowen chuckled. Lu Hantian nodded and took a deep look at the Zhuowen. After not seeing him for more than 2 years, the Zhuowen gave him a mysterious feeling. Although the Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the peak heavenly venerate, he still felt a faint sense of threat from the Zhuowen. For a 2nd-level Emperor Realm warrior to feel threatened by a peak heavenly venerate warrior, this was an extremely inconceivable thing to many warriors. However, Lu Hantian felt this way. In fact, when Zhuowen used the 9 flames karmic fire to successfully cultivate the final realm of the nirvana Vairocana, the Buddha demon eye seemed to have triggered some kind of taboo. The Buddha demon eye emitted an extremely rich Buddhist power. This Buddhist power was extremely vast and it directly formed a Buddha body in front of Zhuowen that looked exactly like him. The power of the Buddha body carried all the Buddhist power of the nirvana Vairocana. Moreover, this Buddha body also contained a part of Zhuowen's consciousness. If Zhuowen wanted to frighten this Buddha body, it was completely a matter of thought. He could control this Buddha body as if it was his own arm. What was even more strange was that this Buddha body could merge with Zhuowen, erupting with power that was far beyond his current limit. It seems that I have activated part of the Buddha demon eye's power after cultivating the nirvana Vairocana to the extreme, Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. He knew very well that the Buddha body's appearance was all thanks to the Buddha demon eye. Boy, if you can reach the peak of the 5th level bedevilment, you may be able to activate the Buddha demon eye again and construct a devil body for you. This way, you will have 3 bodies at the same time, which means that you will have 3 lives. Haha. As long as you are willing to do it, this old bag of bones will accompany you. Elder Shiyuan naturally had no objections. After that, the group of people left the Vitality Tower with clear division of labor. Lu Hantian began to deploy the Heavenly Empire's troops, while Zhuowen, Elder Shiyuan, and the others went to the house of Marquis Qin to meet the Flame Emperor. After that, the 2 of them did not stop to rest and came to a barren land outside the prefecture. This time, Zhuowen planned to set up the river diagram formation in the jade tripod. After this period of meditation, although he had not completely mastered it, it was more than enough for him to get started. Coupled with Elder Shiyuan, who was a complete Grade 6 Arcana Master, Zhuowen was confident that he could set up a huge river diagram formation outside the city. The power of this formation was extremely terrifying. It could seal the 5 senses of a martial artist, causing them to fall into a state of no resistance and be at the mercy of others. When Elder Shiyuan helped Zhuowen set up the river diagram formation, he was also shocked. This was because he also discovered the mystery and power of the river diagram formation. If the power of this formation was fully exerted, even he would fall into a state of slow reaction. This kid is really getting more and more mysterious. He can actually draw such a terrifying formation. I really don't know what kind of adventures this kid has had outside. Looking at Zhuowen, who was standing in the void and concentrating on drawing the formation stroke by stroke, Elder Shiyuan could not help but sigh. Elder Shiyuan could not help but sigh in a low voice that the younger generation would surpass them in time. 2 days. Zhuowen had been drawing outside the city for 2 days. He had drawn almost 100 miles outside the city into the river diagram formation. If someone entered the range of the river diagram formation, Zhuowen only needed to activate the river diagram formation and countless martial artists who were trapped in the formation would fall into a state of complete loss of their 5 senses. Phew. After drawing the last stroke, Zhuowen let out a long sigh and sat on the ground. It was the first time that he had drawn such a huge formation. Even though his mental strength was much stronger than the average Arcana Master, it was still a little difficult for him. Even Elder Shiyuan, who was acting as his assistant, felt a little exhausted. It could be seen that drawing such a huge river diagram formation consumed a lot of their mental strength. Hee. Now we just have to wait for the fish to take the bait. After resting for a while, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and concealed all the power of the river diagram formation around him. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Zhuowen, what is the name of your formation? Elder Shiyuan asked curiously. Chapter 1161. 2 armies face off. Rows and rows of soldiers wearing black metal armor quietly stood on the large empty ground outside the imperial capital. The black mass looked just like an endless dark cloud. Countless soldiers raised their heads and looked up with worshipful gazes. On the city wall, Emperor Qing stood quietly, looking down at the dark cloud of soldiers below. He said faintly, "The remnants of the Celestial Empire have invaded Qingxian. They deserve to die. The remnants of the Celestial Empire have invaded Qingxian. They deserve to die." Countless soldiers roared as if their hearts and lungs were being torn apart. They shouted these words passionately, and their eyes were full of excitement. "Let's go to Muqin County. Today, we must kill the remnants of the Celestial Empire." The Green Emperor slowly opened his mouth. His right hand pointed in the direction of Muqin City. Immediately, monstrous and orderly footsteps resounded outside of the capital. The black mass of soldiers, under the leadership of their respective generals, moved in unison toward Muqin City. Emperor Qing stood quietly on the city wall, looking at the soldiers who were gradually leaving. His eyes were filled with coldness. "Elder Qingji, when will we make our move?" Not long after the soldiers left, 2 teams of 10 people leaped onto the city wall and came to Emperor Qing's side. The leaders of the 2 teams were Jin Sheng of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty and Yun Zhongjuan of the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty. It was Jin Sheng who asked the question. "We just need to follow behind the soldiers. With the military strength of the imperial capital, we can definitely crush the Celestial Empire. When the Celestial Empire's military strength is almost exhausted, the high-level cultivators will come out to help. At that time, we will suddenly appear and catch them off guard. Isn't that better?" Emperor Qing said with a smile with his hands behind his back. Yun Zhongjuan and Jin Sheng both nodded. Emperor Qing's move was good. The military strength of the imperial capital was much stronger than that of the Celestial Empire in terms of both quantity and quality. They could force the high-level cultivators of the Celestial Empire to come out. When the time came, they would definitely catch the Celestial Empire off guard. "Let's go," Emperor Qing said, and a group of people quietly followed behind the army in front. With their cultivation, it was too easy for them to be undetected. When the army of the imperial capital set off, the atmosphere in Muqin County became extremely solemn. In the reception hall, Lu Hantian, Zhuowen, and the others were all sitting upright. Their eyes were full of solemnity. Just now, the Celestial Empire's scout studio reported that the Emperor Qing from the imperial capital had sent an army to the Celestial Empire. They were obviously intending to gather all the forces was to attack the Celestial Empire, to attack, and attack, the Celestial Empire. The Celestial Empire's attack. Emperor Yang Emperor, how many soldiers, how many troops have you, Empire? How? Emperor Emperor of the Empire Yang Emperor from the Empire Emperor of the Empire Studio Emperor Flame Yang Studio Emperor Empire Emperor Emperor Emperor. Lu Hantian frowned slightly and said with some worry, our Celestial Empire only has 150,000 soldiers. Even if we include the reinforcements from the Yangxian Empire, we only have 350,000 soldiers. The difference is a little big, Brother Hantian, don't worry. Senior Shiyuan and I have set up a very powerful origin formation outside the county capital. This origin formation can completely reverse this difference, Zhuowen said with a confident smile. I hope so. Lu Hantian said worriedly. Although Zhuowen looked extremely confident, he was still a little scared. After all, the difference of 150,000 soldiers was extremely huge. If we can't deal with them this time, we can only let the high-level cultivators of the Celestial Empire take action together to make up for the lack of numbers, Lu Hantian thought to himself. He was also a little helpless. Let's go to the edge of the city first, Zhuowen said with a smile. Everyone nodded in agreement. Soon after, the group walked out of the reception hall and used their movement techniques to rush to the edge of the city. The Origin Qi Tower that stood not far from the county capital had already been absorbed into Lu Hantian's body. He had already refined the Origin Qi Tower into an emperor weapon. Naturally, he could store and release it as he wished. At this moment, the atmosphere of the entire provincial capital had become extremely solemn. Everyone had sunk into a pressure that was difficult to hide. Numerous armored soldiers in the city gripped their weapons tightly in their hands as they waited for the bloody battle that was likely to occur. Our Yangxian Empire's soldiers have arrived. Shall we meet the imperial capital's soldiers outside the city? The Flame Emperor suddenly said. Yes. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he heard deafening footsteps coming from afar. Soon after, they discovered that a few hundred miles away from the city, a black mass of soldiers was neatly walking towards them. The armor of these soldiers was engraved with a flame symbol, indicating that these soldiers were the soldiers of the Yangxian Empire. Your Majesty, the Flame Emperor. When the 200,000 soldiers of the Yangxian Empire arrived at the city, they all knelt on one knee and shouted respectfully to the Flame Emperor on the city wall. The Flame Emperor nodded and said in a clear voice, "Stay where you are." Yes. The soldiers of the Yangxian Empire did not disobey the Flame Emperor. Instead, they all responded and turned around, staying where they were. At the same time, the city gate of the county capital slowly opened. The 150,000 soldiers of the Celestial Empire walked out in an orderly manner under Lu Hantian's command and stood beside the soldiers of the Yangxian Empire. On the city wall, the important figures of the county capital had all arrived. Even Uncle Liu, Fang Yu, Lu Yuanhua, and Lu Yongsheng were standing on the city wall. However, the four of them looked at Zhuowen with a trace of respect in their eyes. Lu Hantian had already announced Zhuowen's identity to the entire county capital. Therefore, many people in the county capital knew that the young man standing beside Lu Hantian was Zhuowen, who had shaken the entire Qing Empire. He had once killed 5 holy masters alone and even dared to fight with Emperor Qing. Although he lost in the end, it was a glorious defeat. After all, Zhuowen was only at the sovereign realm back then. It was already impressive for someone with such cultivation to have the courage to challenge an emperor realm expert, let alone fight with Emperor Qing like Zhuowen did. Although Zhuowen's cultivation has improved a lot and he has reached the peak Holy Master realm, he has yet to enter the Emperor realm. How can he be a match for an Emperor realm expert like Emperor Qing? Fang Yu furrowed her brows and said with some dissatisfaction. Although he had heard many legends about Zhuowen in the past, Zhuowen had yet to enter the Emperor realm. Even if he was at the peak of the Heavenly Venerate realm, there was still a big gap between him and the Emperor realm. Zhuowen wouldn't be of much use in this high-level battle. Brother Zhuo is a grade 6 Arcana master. This time, he and Elder Shiyuan have set up a powerful origin formation outside the city. How can it be useless? Miao LV said with dissatisfaction as she placed her hands on her hips. He is a grade 6 Arcana master? Fang Yu was stunned and did not say anything else. A peak Holy Master might not be of much use, but a grade 6 Arcana master was much more useful in a battle. Rumble. A dull rumbling sound came from afar. Then, Lu Hantian, Zhuowen, and the others frowned as they saw an army that was as dense as a black cloud advancing in their direction. The Imperial Capital Army is here, Lu Hantian said in a low voice as his eyes shone with a sharp light. I don't see Emperor Qing and the others in the army, the Flame Emperor said with a frown. I'm afraid they are secretly following behind the army. We have to be careful. Emperor Qing and his reinforcements are not simple. We can't be careless, Lu Hantian said cautiously. Boom. 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 Soon, the Imperial Capital Army arrived at the foot of the city and confronted the Celestial Empire's army from afar. A murderous aura suddenly erupted. When the two armies faced off, momentum was the most important thing. Both the Imperial Capital Army and the Celestial Empire's army stared at each other with cold eyes. Kill. After the confrontation lasted for half an incense stick's time, a general in heavy armor at the front of the Imperial Capital Army shouted. He held the green dragon crescent blade in his hand and slapped his horse's belly with his feet. He commanded the thousands of soldiers and horses to charge toward the Celestial Empire's army. Stay where you are and don't move. Zhuowen slowly uttered these words, causing the Celestial Empire's army, which had been in an uproar because of the Imperial Capital's army flying over, to quieten down. Although many of the soldiers showed displeasure in their eyes, obeying orders was their code, and they absolutely could not go against it. What is Zhuowen doing? Why is he telling the army to stay where they are? Is he trying to kill them? Zhuowen's voice was not loud, but it was extremely loud and clear. Many people around him heard it clearly. Everyone was stunned at first, then they raised their doubts. Although Lu Hantian and the Flame Emperor were also surprised, they chose to believe in Zhuowen unconditionally. When the Imperial Capital Army was about 100 miles away from the city wall, Zhuowen and Elder Shiyuan looked at each other. Immediately, the two of them formed a seal at the same time. Suddenly, a mysterious power surged out from the 100 miles. In the sky, a huge draconic horse was soaring, and the river diagram pattern on its back was constantly being outlined at a speed visible to the naked eye. The moment the river diagram was outlined, an extremely powerful aura flowed out, spreading over the entire range of 100 miles. The army of the Imperial Capital that had charged into the area of 50 kilometers was instantly stunned. Because they noticed that their 5 senses seemed to have vanished at this moment. They were unable to hear, unable to see, and even their sense of smell and touch had been completely taken away by the river diagram formation. Kill. The moment the array was activated, Zhuowen spat out the word kill. Monstrous killing intent soared into the sky and filled the sky above the entire county. Kill. Chapter 1162. To start the war behind the Imperial Capital's army, Emperor Qing, Yun Zhongjuan, Saint Jin, and a few others followed quietly. With their Imperial Power Realm cultivation, it was naturally easy for them to hide their tracks. This time, Yun Zhongjuan and Saint Jin each brought 3 people. Including Emperor Qing, there were a total of 9 people. Coincidentally, among the 8 people from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Alcade Holy Dynasty, there were 4 martial emperors. The remaining 4 were peak heavenly venerables. Yun Zhongjuan and Saint Jin were 3rd-level martial emperors. The other 2 martial emperors from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Alcade Holy Dynasty were 1st-level martial emperors. Including Emperor Qing, who was second-level martial emperors, there were a total of 5 martial emperors. This was an extremely terrifying lineup. One should know that in the past, Emperor Qing was the only martial emperor in the Qing Xian Empire. Even after Lu Hantian's sudden rise, he had also advanced to the martial emperor realm. There were only 2 martial emperors in total. But now, with the support of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Alcade Holy Dynasty, Emperor Qing's side had a total of 5 martial emperors. For a small place like Qing Xian Empire, it was definitely an extremely terrifying lineup. It could even be said that in Qing Xian Empire, such a lineup could even sweep away everything. This was also the most fundamental reason why Emperor Qing was so confident at this moment. Our imperial capital has a total of 500,000 elite troops, while the Celestial Empire only has 350,000. The difference in strength between the two sides is huge. When the Celestial Empire's army can't resist, Lu Hantian and the others will definitely not be able to sit still. When that time comes, we will give them a warning. At that time, Lu Hantian and the others will definitely be unable to escape. If Zhuowen is in the Celestial Empire, he will definitely make a move. Then, it will be time for the 2 of you to take revenge, Emperor Qing said with a chuckle. I hope that little bastard Zhuowen is in the Celestial Empire. Our people are not so easy to kill. Since he has killed them, he must pay with his life, Yun Zhongjuan said with a cold gaze. Although Saint Jin beside him, Saint Jin did not say anything. From the murderous intent that burst out of his eyes, he was thinking the same thing as Yun Zhongjuan. Kill. At this moment, the imperial capital's army began to charge. Looking at this scene, Emperor Qing crossed his arms, his eyes filled with confidence. 500,000 against 350,000. No matter how one looked at it, their imperial capital's army had a much higher chance of winning. Under Zhuo Wen's command, the army of the Celestial Empire stopped completely where they were. Emperor Qing frowned slightly when he saw this scene. He did not know what Zhuo Wen was up to, but a cold smile still appeared at the corner of his mouth. When the river diagram array rose, the Heavenly Empire's army moved. What happened next stunned the Qing Emperor, and the expression on his face froze. This was because he discovered that the soldiers of the imperial capital who had entered the river diagram formation were all stunned on the spot. He did not know what they were doing. Even when the Celestial Empire's army approached, they still did not notice. In such a strange state, the imperial capital's army, which had been full of momentum, suddenly became stray dogs. They were almost unilaterally slaughtered by the Celestial Army without any ability to resist. What's going on? Emperor Qing murmured in disbelief. It's that formation. Yun Zhongjuan's gaze suddenly fell on the huge dragon horse in the sky, and he could not help but whisper to Emperor Qing. This formation. Was it set up by that little bastard Zhuowen? Emperor Qing stared at Zhuowen's figure on the city wall in the distance. Just now, it was Zhuowen who told the Celestial Empire's army to stand still. When the imperial capital's army fell into the river diagram array, it was also Zhuowen who said the word kill and ordered the Celestial Empire's army to slaughter the imperial capital's army. It seems that this kid is indeed a little unusual. However, it's useless no matter how unusual he is because he will definitely die. Yun Zhongjuan and Jin Sheng looked at Zhuowen with murderous eyes. Their purpose for coming here this time was to kill Zhuowen. In just half an hour, the 200,000 imperial capital soldiers who first entered the river diagram array were almost single-handedly slaughtered by the Celestial Empire's army. On the other hand, the Celestial Empire's army did not suffer any casualties. Such a battle record was really heaven-defying. On the other hand, the remaining 300,000 soldiers of the imperial capital revealed terrified expressions as they retreated by almost 100 steps. Not a single one of them dared to step into the river diagram formation. What had happened earlier was truly too strange to them. The Celestial Empire's army did not pursue them. After witnessing the power of the river diagram array, they were full of awe for Zhuowen. To be able to set up such a powerful formation, Zhuowen was obviously an arcanist with extremely powerful mental strength. Soldiers were most afraid of arcanists. This was because such an existence in a war could generally determine the outcome of the war. If this formation is not broken, your imperial capital's army will not be able to compete with the Celestial Empire's army at all, Jin Sheng suddenly said. The Qing Emperor's expression was quite ugly. His eyes flickered as he said to Jin Sheng and Yun Zhongjuan, "It seems that we still need to take action in this war. Can you two lend me a hand? Qing Ji will definitely thank you after this matter is over." Jin Sheng and Yun Zhongjuan looked at each other and smiled. "Since we're already here, why can't we give Elder Qingji some face? Besides, our goal this time is that little bastard Zhuowen. Since this little bastard is on the Celestial Empire's side, it's not a big deal to destroy the Celestial Empire while we're at it." Hearing that the two of them had agreed, the Qing Emperor's eyes lit up with joy. He said, "Now, I'll go and break that formation first. Once the formation is broken, we'll begin the attack on the Celestial Empire's capital." With that, the Saiyan Emperor took a step forward and instantly rushed out from his hiding place. He came to the sky above the river diagram array, and a terrifying Emperor's aura spread out, causing 9 cyan stars to descend from the sky, making it look extremely powerful. "Your Majesty, the Qing Emperor." Seeing the Qing Emperor appear, the imperial capital's soldiers shouted and knelt down on one knee. Their originally dispirited morale suddenly rose. The old fox, the Qing Emperor, has finally come out. On the city wall, Zhuo Wen, Lu Hantian, and the others' eyes lit up as they stared at the figure surrounded by 9 cyan stars. Looking at the Qing Emperor's goal, he should be trying to break the river diagram array. "We can't let him succeed. I'll go and meet him." Lu Hantian snorted coldly and suddenly stepped out. 9 white Emperor stars descended and instantly arrived where the Qing Emperor was. With a stomp of his right hand, the 9 white stars crushed toward the Qing Emperor like 9 mountains. The Qing Emperor, who had originally planned to destroy the formation, also noticed Lu Hantian's 9 white stars. He frowned slightly and had no choice but to use the 9 green stars to block them. Bang! 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 The 18 stars instantly collided, and a thunderous sound resounded in the sky. Then, white and green starlight scattered out, enveloping the entire sky above the Celestial Empire's capital. It was as if a meteor shower was falling from the sky. Thump! 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 The Qing Emperor and Lu Hantian each took dozens of steps back and faced each other in the sky. The terrifying Emperor's aura was like a mountain, enveloping the entire Celestial Empire's soldiers and causing them to tremble. They could not withstand the Emperor's aura and knelt on one knee on the ground. "Lu Hantian, you've improved a lot. In just 2 years, you've actually reached this level." The Qing Emperor looked at Lu Hantian with fear and said coldly, "Hee. Isn't this all thanks to you? Speaking of which, I should be the one thanking you. Don't you think so, Qing Emperor?" Lu Hantian grinned and said in a carefree manner. Hearing this, the Qing Emperor's face twitched, and his expression darkened. Then, he looked at Zhuowen and said coldly, "Zhuowen, didn't you come all the way back from the Sea of Bitterness to take revenge on me? Now that I'm right in front of you, why don't you come out?" Hearing that the Qing Emperor, a second-level emperor, was challenging Zhuowen, a peak heavenly master, many people in the Celestial Empire felt contempt. The Qing Emperor is really shameless. He's a second-level emperor, and Big Brother Zhuo is only a peak heavenly master. How dare he ask Big Brother Zhuo to fight him? Miao LV snorted indignantly. Fang Yu, Uncle Liu, and the others nodded in agreement. The Qing Emperor's actions were indeed despicable. Of course, many people also thought that Zhuowen would not accept the Qing Emperor's challenge. After all, there was still a huge gap between the two. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Then, under everyone's astonished gazes, Zhuowen stepped out and appeared in front of the Qing Emperor in an instant. He stared at the Qing Emperor fearlessly and said, "You're right. I, Zhuowen, have come here to chop off your dog head." Hearing this, many people in the Celestial Empire stared blankly at Zhuowen's back. There was only one thought in their minds, and that was whether Zhuowen had gone crazy. Although Zhuowen had improved a lot in the past 2 years, he had not reached the Emperor realm. How could he be a match for an Emperor realm cultivator? Haha. Zhuowen, you are still as arrogant as before. A mere peak heavenly venerable actually dares to accept the challenge. I don't know if I should say that your courage is commendable or that you are foolish. The Lotus Emperor suddenly sneered. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely calm. He said indifferently, "The rest of you don't have to hide anymore. Since the Qing Emperor dares to lead the soldiers of the imperial capital to launch a general attack today, he must have some reinforcements. So, come out." Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen's words came out, 8 silhouettes rushed out from their hiding places and landed beside Emperor Qing. These 8 silhouettes' auras were extremely terrifying, especially the 2 in the lead. Their auras were even stronger than Emperor Qing and Lu Hantian's. 2 Third Heaven Emperor Realm Cultivators? Lu Hantian stared at Yun Zhongjuan and Jin Sheng and could not help but exclaim. There are actually 2 Third Heaven Emperor Realm Cultivators. Such a lineup. Lu Hantian's voice was not soft. Countless cultivators in the Celestial Empire heard it clearly and burst into an uproar. Even the Yang Emperor could not help but tremble, and a trace of intense fear appeared in his eyes. How did the Qing Emperor do it? How did he manage to find so many Emperor Realm cultivators? Chapter 1163. Yun Zhongjuan and Jin Sheng. Whether it was Jin Sheng or Yun Zhongjuan, their auras were extremely similar to Supreme Jin and Blue Emperor. Therefore, when Zhuowen saw them appear, he deduced that they should be from the Blue Whale and Alcade sacred dynasties. After all, Zhuowen had slaughtered the top geniuses of these 2 sacred dynasties, including Supreme Jin and Blue Emperor. Looking at the group of 8 people who suddenly appeared, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with understanding. In fact, when he knew that the Azure Emperor would ask for reinforcements, he should have known that these so-called reinforcements were most likely from the 2 sacred dynasties. With the conflict between Zhuowen and the 2 sacred dynasties, even Zhuowen didn't believe that the 2 sacred dynasties didn't hold a grudge against him. The Azure Emperor only needed to release the news that Zhuowen had returned to the Azure mystic dynasty, and the 2 sacred dynasties would definitely send experts to hunt him down. Pretty smart. We are indeed from the 2 sacred dynasties. I am Jin Sheng of the Alcade sacred dynasty, and he is Yun Zhongjuan, the Holy Lord of the Blue Whale sacred dynasty. Jin Sheng chuckled, his voice filled with sinister intent as he said coldly to Zhuowen. The Holy Lord of the Blue Whale sacred dynasty, Yun Zhongjuan? Zhuowen glanced at Yun Zhongjuan. The pressure that Yun Zhongjuan gave off was even stronger than Jin Sheng's. He should be at the peak of the 3rd Heaven Martial Emperor realm, not far from the 4th Heaven Martial Emperor realm. Keek. Zhuowen, I think you know why we are here. You have killed many people from our 2 sacred dynasties. You should know your crime, right? I think it's better for you to obediently surrender. Yun Zhongyang stared at Zhuowen and said indifferently. What if I don't? Zhuowen replied indifferently. Yun Zhongyang's eyes curved dangerously, and he said, if you don't obediently surrender, I think you know the consequences better than we do. We will make you suffer a fate worse than death. Hee. Then I want to see how you will make me suffer a fate worse than death. Zhuowen laughed and mocked fearlessly. Me. You little brats who don't know what's good for you, attack together. Capture this little bastard for me. Just remember not to kill him. Yun Zhongyang said to the 3 people behind him. Yes. Among the 4 people sent by the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty, only Yun Zhongyang was a 3rd Heaven Monarch. As for the remaining 3, one of them was a 1st Heaven Monarch, and the other 2 were peak Heavenly Venerables. The Wavering Light Holy Dynasty's lineup was similar to the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's. Jin Sheng remained indifferent when he saw Yun Zhongjuan making a move. He just stood there quietly. Zhuowen was just a peak Heavenly Venerable. There was no need for the Yarrow Guang Holy Dynasty to join forces with the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty to deal with him. Otherwise, they would be overestimating Zhuowen. Ziyang. Zhuowen stood quietly in the void, watching the 3 people from the Blue Whale Holy Court approach. He calmly called out to Ziyang and the other 4 on the city wall. Immediately, 5 figures descended behind Zhuowen, their auras as vast as the sea surging out. Boom, boom, boom. Ziyang instantly clashed with the 1st Heaven Monarch of the Blue Whale Holy Court. Bai Mai and Huang Liang also clashed with the other 2 peak Heavenly Venerables. Instantly, terrifying yuan qi filled the sky. The colorful yuan qi emitted by the 6 people spread out, stimulating the eyes of everyone present. Zhuowen actually has such a powerful force by his side. Yun Zhongjuan muttered to himself with a frown as he looked at the 3 subordinates blocked by Xiang and the other 2. Zhuowen is not simple. He actually has 5 powerful subordinates. Yun Zhongjuan, do you want me to give you a hand? Jin Sheng suddenly said with a chuckle. Although Jin Sheng was surprised by the sudden appearance of Xiang and the others beside Zhuowen, he didn't really care. A first heaven monarch was no different from an ant in his eyes. Jin Sheng, you don't have to beat around the bush. Hurry up and let your subordinates attack. Zhuowen is only a peak heavenly venerate. A first heaven monarch should be more than enough to deal with him, Yun Zhongjuan said with a cold snort. Jin Sheng smiled and nodded to the 3 people from the Alcade Holy Court behind him. Then, the 3 of them looked at each other and rushed toward Zhuowen according to Jin Sheng's order. Damn it! Lu Hantian frowned when he saw this. He stepped forward, intending to help Zhuowen. However, Qing Emperor blocked him at the right time. Lu Hantian, your opponent is me. Why are you running so fast? Qing Emperor said with a smile. Get lost! Shouted Lu Hantian furiously. 9 white stars condensed into a beam of white light and moved towards Great Emperor Qing. Great Emperor Qing didn't panic at all. He controlled the 9 blue stars to collide with Lu Hantian's attack. Great Emperor Qing didn't panic at all. He controlled the 9 blue stars to collide with Lu Hantian's attack. The power of the stars filled the air and almost destroyed the space between them. Both of them were second heaven monarchs. Their strength was well matched. It was difficult for Lu Hantian to break through Qing Emperor's defense. Swoosh, swoosh. The 3 people from the Alcade Holy Court were very fast. They arrived in front of Zhuowen in 5 breaths. Guang Han and Xie, who were standing behind Zhuowen, looked vigilant. They asked in a low voice, Master, what should we do? The 2 of you will deal with the 2 peak heavenly masters. Leave the first heaven monarch to me. Zhuowen instructed in a low voice. Then, his body shot out like lightning towards the first heaven monarch. Many warriors in the prefecture were stunned. Was Zhuowen courting death? He was actually heading towards the first heaven monarch. Brother Zhuo. Miao Lv's beautiful eyes were filled with worry. She couldn't help but exclaim. Fang Yu, LV Yongsheng and Lu Yuanhua beside her also had strange expressions on their faces. In their opinion, Zhuowen, a peak heavenly master, was going against a first heaven monarch. It was no different from a moth flying into a flame. Guang Han and Xie didn't feel much. As Zhuowen's servants, they knew his strength better than anyone else. Zhuowen was a monstrous genius who had defeated Lan Ju. An ordinary first heaven monarch from the Alcade Holy Court wouldn't pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. Of course, this was only what the 2 of them thought. Most people in the prefecture only had one thought: Zhuowen was courting death. As expected, your arrogance knows no bounds. A mere peak heavenly master dares to go against me. You're courting death. The first heaven monarch from the Alcade Holy Court was a middle-aged man in a blue robe. His eyes were long and narrow, exuding a sinister aura. When he saw Zhuowen taking the initiative to attack him, his eyes were filled with mockery. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Zhuowen and the blue-robed man collided. Zhuowen held an Azura war halberd in his hand, and a terrifying emperor's aura poured out. With a twist of his right hand, he slashed at the blue-robed man's chest. Emperor's weapon? The blue-robed man could sense the Emperor's aura from the Azura battle halberd. He cried out in a low voice and reached out his right hand, summoning 9 Emperor stars to protect him. Boom! The Azura battle halberd and the Emperor stars collided. Terrifying shockwaves erupted from the collision. Then, the blue-robed man and Zhuowen both retreated dozens of steps, facing each other from a distance. Achem! A low-level Emperor's weapon? Yun Zhongjuan and Jin Sheng, who were watching the battle, frowned when they saw this scene. They had not expected Zhuowen to possess a low-level emperor weapon. With his peak heavenly venerate cultivation base, His combat strength was actually comparable to a first-level Emperor Realm Warrior when he wielded a low-level Emperor weapon. After all, the first Heaven Monarch from the Alcade Holy Court did not have an Emperor's weapon. Therefore, the strength he could exert was not much stronger than Zhuowen, who had an Emperor's weapon. Many warriors in the prefecture saw Zhuowen and the blue-robed man retreating as soon as they collided. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Zhuowen, a peak heavenly master, was not at a disadvantage against the first Heaven Monarch. Instead, they were evenly matched. Of course, there were some sharp-eyed people who could see that the weapon in Zhuowen's hand was extraordinary. They vaguely guessed that the Azura battle halberd was a powerful Emperor's weapon. I didn't expect that you, a mere peak heavenly master, would have an Emperor's weapon. Your weapon is mine. The blue-robed man stared at the Azura battle halberd in Zhuowen's hand. He whistled and flew out again. This time, he didn't hold back and used his full strength. The terrifying Emperor's aura was like a huge mountain, crushing down, causing Zhuowen's body to sink. Third-level bedevilment. Zhuowen held the halberd in his right hand and stood proudly. He directly exerted the power of the third-level bedevilment. Suddenly, a terrifying blood chi burst out, forming a terrifying blood-red vortex with him as the center. His blood hair grew to his buttocks. Kill. With a step, the terrifying power left a ring-shaped airwave in the void. Zhuowen shot out like an arrow and arrived in front of the blue-robed man in an instant. Whoosh! The Azura battle halberd was wrapped in an indomitable aura and turned into countless halberd shadows, piercing towards the blue-robed man's vital points. Damn it! How did this guy's aura suddenly become so strong? The blue-robed man's pupils shrank as he felt the terrifying aura coming from Zhuowen's Azura battle halberd. His face finally changed. He raised his hands and a surge of Yuan power gushed out. The 9 Emperor stars gathered together and formed a starry shield. Bang! The sharp tip of the Azura war halberd abruptly shot out, colliding with the star shield. Then, a crisp and ear-piercing sound of metal colliding rang out, and the Azura war halberd's forward momentum was halted. Morning treasure seal. Zhuowen was not in a hurry. He immediately used the morning treasure seal of the 7 emotions treasured seal. A sorrowful aura descended on the blue-robed man's heart like a curse. Then, the blue-robed man was shocked to find that his strength had been weakened by nearly 20%. Break. Chapter 1164. Jin Sheng makes a move. A blood-curdling scream rang out as the blue-robed man stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. He was a first-level emperor, but he was defeated by a peak heavenly master. Die. Zhuowen twisted his right hand and a terrifying blood chi erupted from the Azura battle halberd. The blue-robed man felt a sharp pain in his chest and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Even the nascent soul in his body could not escape the fate of being destroyed. Countless droplets of blood rained down. However, the entire county, both inside and outside, had sunk into silence. Everyone stared at the blue-robed man, who had already exploded into a bloody mist and could not be any more dead. All of them fell into a daze. The blue-robed man, a first-level emperor, was so weak that he was instantly killed by Zhuowen, a peak heavenly master. When everyone recovered from their shock, they knew that it wasn't that the blue-robed man was too weak, and it was that Zhuowen was too strong. A peak heavenly exalt had instantly killed a first-level emperor. Exactly how terrifying was this kid? So strong. Miao LV covered her mouth and murmured softly. Fang Yu, Lu Yuanhua, and LV Yongsheng were even more shocked than Miao LV. Although they knew that Zhuowen was strong, they had never imagined that a peak heavenly master could kill a first-level emperor in an instant. How did Zhuowen do it? Fang Yu, in particular, hated Zhuowen because of Miao LV's warm attitude towards Zhuowen. He wanted to take revenge on Zhuowen. Fortunately, he did not take revenge in the end. Otherwise, he would not even know how he died. Lord Zhuowen is mighty. Outside the city, the 350,000 soldiers of the Celestial Empire shouted one after another, their faces full of impassioned expressions. The high and mighty enemy Emperor Realm Expert had been killed by Zhuowen just like that, greatly boosting the morale of the Celestial Empire's army. Many soldiers even looked at Zhuowen with eyes full of admiration. The news of Zhuowen's return had already spread throughout the city. Now that Zhuowen had killed a first-level emperor, countless warriors in the city looked at Zhuowen with burning eyes. Boom! The Qing emperor and Lu Hantian clashed again, and then both of them retreated dozens of steps. Both of them noticed the situation on Zhuowen's side and were surprised. Lu Hantian looked surprised, while the Qing emperor looked gloomy. Haha. Zhuowen, I knew you would gain something this time. This is really beyond my expectations. You killed a first-level emperor as a peak celestial master. Your talent is absolutely monstrous. Lu Hantian laughed. The Qing emperor's face was extremely ugly. He looked at Jin Sheng and Yun Zhongjuan and said, "You too. This Zhuowen is really arrogant. He killed another emperor of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty. I don't think you two will stand by and do nothing, right?" Yun Zhongjuan sneered and said to Jin Sheng, "Brother Jin Sheng, that emperor was a member of your Yaoguang sacred dynasty. I don't think you will stand by and do nothing when this boy killed him, right?" Jin Sheng's eyes were gloomy to the extreme. He glanced coldly at Yun Zhongjuan, then stared at Zhuowen and said, "Good. You dare to kill a member of my Yaoguang sacred dynasty? You know the consequences." Zhuowen stood proudly in the void and said indifferently, "It's not the first time I've killed your Yaoguang sacred dynasty. Will you let me go if I kill one less person?" Boom. Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen said this, Jin Sheng clenched his fists, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Terrifying emperor's pressure erupted like a volcano and rushed out, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. "You're really courting death, little bastard. I'll tell you clearly today that you're dead meat." After he finished speaking, Jin Sheng did not waste any more time. He took a step in the air and arrived in front of Zhuowen. He pressed his right hand down and golden light flickered. It turned into a gigantic golden rock that was dozens of feet tall. This indestructible golden rock came crashing down from the sky, whistling through the air as it headed straight for Zhuowen's face. Clang! Zhuowen swept out his halberd, and the tip of the halberd, which was covered in blood qi, pressed against the surface of the golden stone. Then, Zhuowen was shocked to find that a huge force came from his right hand, causing his whole body to compress. This huge force was so terrifying that it seemed like it was going to crush Zhuowen. Deng! Deng! Under this huge force, Zhuowen couldn't help but retreat dozens of steps. He stared at Jin Sheng, who was slightly surprised. Obviously, Jin Sheng thought that Zhuowen wouldn't be able to resist this move. He didn't expect that this kid would only retreat a dozen steps. Despicable. A third heaven emperor actually dares to bully a junior at the peak of the heavenly master realm. Don't you feel ashamed? Lu Hantian's eyes were full of anger. Jin Sheng completely ignored Lu Hantian and said indifferently, "This little bastard deserves to die. He killed the third prince of my Yaoguang sacred dynasty and a few emperor realm experts. It's only right that I kill him." After saying that, Jin Sheng flew out again. Although Lu Hantian was worried about Zhuowen's safety, it was a pity that Emperor Qing was tightly entangled with him, not giving him a chance to help Zhuowen. Jin Sheng's action of bullying the weak had caused the dissatisfaction and anger of countless cultivators in the prefecture. However, no matter how angry they were, it was useless. Jin Sheng had to kill Zhuowen today. Yun Zhongjuan crossed his arms and watched the scene calmly. In his opinion, Zhuowen would definitely die if Jin Sheng took action. Although Zhuowen's combat strength had indeed surprised him, the difference between a third heaven emperor realm and a first heaven emperor realm was like a chasm. No matter how strong Zhuowen was, it was unlikely that he would be a match for Jin Sheng. Boom! Boom! Indeed, as soon as Jin Sheng reached Zhuowen, he launched a barrage of attacks at Zhuowen. Under such attacks, Zhuowen was completely at a disadvantage. It was difficult for him to withstand the attacks. Countless cultivators in the prefecture were anxious when they saw this scene. "How dare you block my attacks? Die!" With a wave of Jin Sheng's right hand, the golden stone condensed from his yuan energy emitted a dazzling golden light as it smashed down heavily in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen raised both of his hands, raising the azure battle halberd above his head in an attempt to block the golden stone. Bang! Zhuo Wen let out a muffled groan. Both of his hands gripped the azure war halberd as he plummeted downwards. Both of his feet stomped on the ground, and the force of his fall caused the ground to shake as if there was an earthquake. Zhuo Wen's knees were slightly bent, and his face was slightly pale. An ant dares to shake a tree? What a joke! Jin Sheng sneered. He raised the golden stone again and smashed it down. This time, the power of the attack was much stronger than before. He was confident that this attack could smash Zhuowen into a meat patty. 4th level bedevilment realm. Zhuowen roared. An even more terrifying slaughter demon Dao Qi burst out from his body. Above his head, a blood-colored air current was formed. The golden stone that was getting closer and closer to him suddenly stopped under the influence of this blood-colored air current. Die! Zhuowen's eyes were red. He raised the azure battle halberd with an unparalleled momentum, wanting to cut Jin Sheng into two. Damn it! This guy's strength has increased again. Jin Sheng's pupils shrank. The golden stone that was smashing towards Zhuowen changed its direction in mid-air and landed in front of Jin Sheng. Suddenly, the azure battle halberd smashed into the golden stone. Ding! The sound of metal clashing resounded. Jin Sheng was forced to take a few steps back under the power of the azure battle halberd. Die! At this moment, Zhuowen was as immovable as a mountain. When he moved, he was as fast as lightning. He raised the azure battle halberd and attacked Jin Sheng like a madman. Bang! 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 The two of them fought again. This time, Jin Sheng was no longer the one suppressing Zhuowen. Instead, they were evenly matched. This scene stunned countless people. Zhuowen actually had the strength to fight against a 3rd-level emperor. This was too terrifying. This guy had yet to enter the emperor realm. Bastard! Jin Sheng couldn't help but curse inwardly when he saw Zhuowen's sudden rise in strength. He was a 3rd-level great emperor, yet he still couldn't take down Zhuowen. It was truly humiliating. Golden star explosion. After saying that, Jin Sheng no longer held back. He formed a seal with both hands and 9 golden emperor stars appeared. Then, the 9 emperor stars circled around Zhuowen in a strange trajectory. An extremely terrifying aura gushed out from the 9 golden stars at the speed of a tsunami. It was as if something was coming out of them. This attack. You'll die. Explode. Jin Sheng sneered. He took a step forward and distanced himself from the 9 golden stars. He formed a seal with his right hand. Immediately, the 9 golden stars that surrounded Zhuowen began to emit an extremely terrifying aura. The aura grew more and more terrifying until the 9 golden stars exploded one after another. The terrifying explosive energy was like a tsunami that instantly drowned Zhuowen. This kid is dead. Yun Zhongjuan sneered when he saw this scene. Oh no! Lu Hantian pushed Emperor Qing back with a punch. When he saw Zhuowen's figure drowned in the explosion of the 9 golden stars, his eyes turned red. Zhuowen! Lu Hantian stepped forward and rushed toward the explosion without any regard for his life. Emperor Qing stood silently on the spot and did not stop him. He could feel how terrifying the explosion of the 9 golden stars was. Zhuowen could not survive such an explosion. Even though Lu Hantian was a 2nd-level martial emperor, it would not be easy for him to enter the explosion to save Zhuowen. Sure enough, when Lu Hantian was about 10 meters away from the explosion, a terrifying heatwave rushed toward him. Lu Hantian hurriedly raised his hand to block it and retreated dozens of steps in a panic. His face was extremely gloomy. This explosive energy was too terrifying. Even Lu Hantian felt some lingering fear. This time, Zhuowen was really going to meet a terrible end. Lu Hantian, don't waste your energy. This kid is dead for sure. Emperor Qing laughed loudly. His eyes were full of joy. Zhuowen was a scourge to him. Now that he had gotten rid of him, Emperor Qing was naturally very happy. However, Emperor Qing's laughter did not last long. An indifferent voice came from the explosion. Destruction of life. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.